My first real motorcycle was a beautiful Matchless G2 CSR 250cc, and it set me up for a life that ends its days, 50 years later, here in Thailand, on a Virago 1100, where my feet can firmly plant on the floor, and the weight is okay, having worked my way through the Harley Davidson thing for more than 20 years. I still love a Hardly Rideable Tractor Glide, but a Road King is just too heavy, and if I can't drop it and lift it up, I don't ride it anymore. So it was obvious that in my career making special interest programs that I would zero in on classic and vintage motorcycles. Here are 4 fantastic hours of 2-wheel smelly vintage metal horses for your nostalgia and memory trip from the comfort of your own sofa or armchair. Classic motorcycles of yesteryear, parts 1 and 2, and then a Spirit of the 60s rally, finishing off with Coast to Coast, the UK equivalent of Route 66 for old-time machines. There are comfort breaks between titles. I hope you enjoy this selection, and indeed, perhaps spot models and marques you owned and rode, maybe even still. If you see one, please comment. All the best, Liam Dale.
Many people today in our high-speed, technologically advanced world regard the bicycle as a very humble means of transportation, although its appearance way back in the 1800s was revolutionary. Travel quickly became practical and inexpensive thanks to the bicycle, and business boomed for the manufacturers, most notably based in the industrial Midlands. The step forward from pedal power to motorised power happened somewhere between the late 19th and early 20th century, when an engine was attached to a motorcycle frame. Like many good ideas throughout history, numerous engineers seem to have been inspired with the same thought at the same time, and, in the case of the motorcycle, this happened throughout Europe, in England, Germany and France, as well as across the Atlantic in America. This programme is a celebration of the very best of British motorcycles and will take you on a nostalgic journey in search of machines that date back to the early 1900s, yet still run to this very day. So, without further preamble, it's time to take to the open road to enjoy the sights, sounds and thrills of a bygone age. When it comes to classic British motorcycles, there are few machines that can inspire the true enthusiast quite like the Ariels. And although this manufacturer is generally less well known than the likes of Triumph, Norton and BSA, those that have been rescued and restored are equally as well loved as their more famous counterparts. Birmingham was at the very heart of the British motorcycle industry, and Ariel was no exception, starting life as a bicycle manufacturer in the Selly Oak district of the city towards the end of the 19th century. With innovative wire-spoked wheels and a lightweight frame, even the bicycles were revolutionary, and when the first Ariel motorcycle appeared in 1901, Complete with a Minerva 211cc engine, powered machines quickly became the company's forte. A year later, the engineer Charles Sangster and his family took over Ariel and designed a 3-speed, 2-stroke motorcycle with a clutch and kickstart, known as the Arielette. But progress came to an abrupt halt with the outbreak of World War I. Like so many of their fellow motorcycle manufacturers, factory production was given over to military requisition. Although the war ended in 1918, it took a while for Ariel to resume civilian production in 1919, and the V-twin motorcycles in solo and sidecar forms continued with little alteration. But Ariel not only manufactured motorcycles, they also produced cars that were at this time failing to perform in the post-war marketplace. Urgent action was required, and when Ariel engaged the services of JAP's former chief designer Val Page in 1925 to create a new type of motorcycle, matters improved dramatically. Val Page's elegantly simple single-cylinder 496cc overhead valve and 557cc side valve engines were state-of-the-art, and the new company slogan, Ariel the Modern Motorcycle, certainly reflected this. In a very short space of time, Ariel motorcycles advanced at a fantastic pace. Edward Turner, another inspirational designer, arrived, bringing ideas for a unique 4-cylinder engine, which materialised as the legendary Square 4, or the Squariel as it was affectionately nicknamed. World events had taken something of a hand in Ariel's fortunes as the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression affected Britain as well as America. Financial troubles forced a complete restructure, and the Square 4 really did put the company back into the black. The new Ariel image also received an injection of a different colour when the Red Hunter models lived up to their name. Again, world events overtook Ariel as the outbreak of a Second World War took its toll. The production line was reduced to military motorcycles for the duration of the conflict, and just as peace began to appear over the horizon, in 1944, the company was taken over by BSA. Sadly, Ariel stagnated after the war, despite such classics as the Huntmaster, which used an Ariel frame with a BSA engine. Further attempts at innovation in the following years culminated in poor sales, and the 1970s Ariel 3 50cc motorised trike was the final disaster. There's no doubt that the years between the two world wars were Ariel's finest, so, without further ado, let's step back to those better days and enjoy some of the finest British motorcycles ever made. It's hard to believe, looking at this fine Ariel motorcycle, a 500cc overhead valve model from 1926, that it was actually brought home by its present owner as a derelict pile of parts in a wheelbarrow. In fairness, that was 20 years ago, and a great deal of dedicated restoration work has gone into getting this motorcycle back on the road. However, the hours spent on restoration and the sheer engineering ingenuity that has brought this classic Ariel up to speed has made this a remarkably rewarding enterprise, and for anyone considering taking on such a project, just watching what can only be described as poetry in motion is truly inspirational. There are those who might ask, why Ariel? What's the fascination with this particular make of motorcycle? As you watch this 1926 Ariel in action, these are questions that are easily and immediately answered. But there's more than just aesthetics to consider. Because the Ariels are not quite so well known or collected as the likes of Triumph, BSA and Norton, the spares are, generally speaking, more plentiful and far more reasonably priced. Also, thanks to the straightforward design, it's even possible to fix many of the mechanical problems you might encounter at the roadside, which can be very useful indeed. With a 1926 vintage, this Ariel is the oldest machine to feature in this programme, but it was a landmark model in the evolution of the Birmingham manufacturer. Up until World War I, Ariel had focused on developing motorcycles for a rapidly expanding number of intrepid travellers, and although the motorcar was beginning to make an appearance, it was definitely a prerogative of the wealthy. The motorcycle had a price tag that made it far more accessible to the ordinary man and, for that matter, woman, a circumstance that would remain in the motorcycle's favour for many years to come. Moving on in time, our next motorcycle dates back to 1932 and truly is a landmark machine. This is the classic Red Hunter, featuring a tuned 4-overhead valve 500cc engine that marked a distinct improvement in Ariel's fortunes. Up until the launch of this motorcycle in 1932, a little like Henry Ford's motorcars, Ariel machines had been predominantly black, and the addition of colour was positively revolutionary. So much so that when this motorcycle first rolled off the production line with its red tank panels, it was named the Red Hunter. To set the launch of the 1932 Red Hunter in context, it's important to look at how Ariel bounced back onto the motorcycle market under the leadership of Jack Sangster. If you mention the name of Ariel motorcycles in general company, the one model that almost everyone will name is the Ariel Square 4, which really was the comeback special. Val Page's stylish Ariel singles were certainly popular, but Edward Turner's favoured a unique 4-cylinder design that effectively placed two 180-degree parallel twins coupled together to run in opposite directions. When the first production models appeared at the Olympia Motorcycle Show in 1930, they caused a sensation, and Ariel was definitely a force to be reckoned with. Consequently, when the Red Hunter made its debut in 1932, motorcyclists were ready and waiting for the next Ariel innovation. Throughout the early 1930s, there were further modifications and additions to the Red Hunter range, including a 250cc and 350cc versions. For Ariel, the Red Hunter proved to be as successful as the Gold Star had been for BSA. There were many competitive outings for the Red Hunters, and success followed success, and popularity soared. This extract from Ariel's advertising campaign for the 1935 500cc Red Hunter says it all. The 500cc Red Hunter, acclaimed by all as being the outstanding sports machine of 1934, is better than ever for 1935. Capable of being tuned to speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour, it places no limit to the scope of the enthusiastic tuner and rider. The new long-stroke engine is now offered with a 2-port head, or with a single-port head without extra charge. The fins, which in conjunction with the improved finning of the nickel-chrome iron cylinder barrel, give increased conductivity and longer wear. The massive crankcase and flywheel assembly are designed to withstand still higher maximum speeds and inertia loads. It's incredible to think that when these words were written in Ariel's advertising department more than 60 years ago, the designers would never have dreamt that the original Red Hunters they were waxing so lyrical about would still be travelling the roads of Britain. And what's more, if you study the internet for information relating to Ariel's Red Hunter, you'll find they're ridden all over the world. Details of a 1935 500cc Red Hunter in California makes for interesting reading. On the other side of the world, a very similar machine to the one you are watching here always starts on the first or second kick, before running extremely smoothly in the Californian sunshine. There's been some restoration with wiring, camshaft and followers needing attention, but overall there are few problems to speak of, and you'll find similar accounts of classic Ariels in Finland, Denmark, Belgium, New Zealand and Australia, to mention but a few. The valuation of the Californian Ariel is a pleasantly reassuring $8,500, although the owners featured in this programme rarely discuss their machines in terms of monetary value. These motorcycles are living, breathing pieces of history. Investment, in terms of hard cash, time, effort, energy and enthusiasm, will usually be considered as a privilege and pleasure rather than a chore. However, that said, those Ariel owners who have managed to save a pile of rusting old scrap and restore it to a pristine example of Ariel engineering will take great satisfaction in a generous valuation, even if it's the saving of a classic motorcycle to be put back on the road that's the major motivational force. As we watch this 1946 Ariel being put through its paces, it may not seem terribly different from the 1932 version, but a great deal certainly happened at Ariel between these two machines. The Red Hunter was undoubtedly one of the mainstays of Ariel during the 1930s and the years of difficult trading through the Depression. The entire range was trimmed down to 250, 350 and 500cc overhead valve deluxe and Red Hunter models. There was also a 600cc side valve sidecar machine and of course the Square 4s. Then, on a seemingly normal Sunday morning in September 1939, the people of Britain stopped what they were doing to listen to an historic radio broadcast. The lawnmowers were silenced, newspapers put aside, and even the motorcycle enthusiasts came in from tinkering in their sheds. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain announced the grave news. Britain was at war with Germany, and although initially everyone returned to their affairs, it wasn't long until the full implications of Chamberlain's declaration began to hit home. For Ariel, all civilian production was brought to an abrupt halt as the British government took over the company's entire output, calling for a purpose-built machine for dispatch riders. A standard 350cc single was the order of the day, and although it lacked the finesse of this stylish Red Hunter, it was a robust motorcycle that off-roaded more than adequately. As a company, Ariel took their wartime patriotic duties very seriously, and during the years of conflict put out an advertisement titled "On Top of Our Job," with words that summed up the mood of the war for the motorcycle industry. Success must inevitably follow the whole energies of an individual or organisation directed towards getting on top of the job. Ariel has always enjoyed a reputation for reliability and dependability, a reputation which is only enhanced by the extensive experience in building wartime machines. The stern task of producing Ariels to stand up to the heavy duties of war's demands has been accompanied by sound development, resulting in even better machines to grace a better era. It was an optimistic look towards the future. But Ariel were not the only British motorcycle manufacturer doing their bit for the war effort. Neighbouring BSA, standing for the Birmingham Small Arms Company, rather than any other explanation you might have heard, went into the war as Britain's largest motorcycle company. Val Page had moved to BSA after revolutionising Ariel and had certainly contributed to their pre-war success. Nevertheless, BSA still had a reputation for being reliable rather than innovative, and for military purposes this was definitely in their favour. BSA sold over 126,000 M20 machines for the Allied war effort, and with 67 factories across the UK, their star, most notably of the gold variety, was rising. BSA actually took over Ariel in 1944, a year before the end of World War II, a prelude to further motorcycle company acquisitions. BSA continued to produce the Ariel machines under their own name, and early post-war civilian trading saw the Red Hunter pick up exactly where it had left off, and as a 1946 500cc Red Hunter, this is precisely the era of the motorcycling we've been enjoying watching. To a certain degree, all of the motorcycles we've seen so far in this programme have that classic Ariel look. But this next machine truly is in a class of its own. This is the Ariel Leader, the culmination of Val Page's lifetime of experience in motorcycle design. And if Yamaha or Suzuki presented it today as a 21st century answer to commuter traffic congestion, it wouldn't seem at all out of place. Yet this motorcycle first rolled off the Ariel production line in 1958, unquestionably decades ahead of its time. This particular leader is actually a 1961 model that's been much treasured by its present owner for the last 28 years. Scrap and breakers yards are great places for classic motorcycle enthusiasts in search of precious replacement parts, and this leader ended up at a scrapyard, abandoned, with a coat of bright orange paint. When this collector discovered it there, while rummaging for a part for a BSA Bantam, he couldn't resist it, despite the appalling colour scheme. Getting the leader back on the road wasn't hugely complex, as one of the major plus points of the design was its simplicity. If you're looking for an Ariel leader, they're definitely becoming more collectible as time goes on, partly because age and rust does take its toll. Nevertheless, this leader has given very good service over the past 28 years, and even when it has on rare occasions proved troublesome, other aerial enthusiasts are never far away. On a trip to Scotland, the little end bearing ceased. But even at a remote Scottish garage, an aerial collector was discovered just a few miles away. By the morning, the bike was fixed and back on the high road. This is nothing unusual in the world of classic motorcycles, and even on the continent, riders have always found like-minded souls to help out in times of breakdown. The generosity of spirit between classic motorcyclists is universal, even transcending language barriers, which all adds to the attraction of these wonderful old machines. From a technical viewpoint, the leader was something of a masterpiece. Val Page literally tore up the rulebook and came up with an easily manufactured tourer that was stylish, effective and economical. A 250cc two-stroke engine hangs from a rigid beam frame made from two simple pressings. Economical to manufacture, the design was nevertheless impressive, with a self-contained fuel tank in the optimum position for the best possible handling. Not that you'd realise there was anything unusual here, because there's a dummy petrol tank between the rider's knees that actually provides the space for a luggage compartment. This allowed for streamlined panniers whilst accommodating the maximum amount of luggage. The entire leader design, although stylish, was eminently practical, even down to the attractive trailing link front forks, which were incorporated to ensure the best possible tyre wear and reliable handling. Equally, the fully enclosed chain case and elegant built-in fairing looked positively space-age, but in fact suited the vagaries of the British weather perfectly. As you would expect, the engine at 250cc did not give the sportiest ride on the planet, but in terms of practicality, it was second to none. It was far from dull, with a 70 mph top speed, and the fuel consumption was remarkable. Cruising at 60 mph would still enable you to get 70 to the gallon, which was a definite bonus. Overall, the aerial leader was just the type of design classic that the British motorcycle industry needed, and even the warranty claims were the lowest of the entire BSA group. In fact, there was only one area in which the leader failed to please, and that was in the lucrative export market to the USA. British motorcycles were well received in America, even dazzling the Hollywood movie industry of the 1950s. Marlon Brando had ridden a Triumph in the cult classic The Wild One, and James Dean, the ultimate rebel without a cause, had appeared the coolest of the cool on his Triumph 500. However, when introduced to the aerial leader, the Americans just didn't know what to make of it. In point of fact, they hated it, and the practical all-weather capabilities were lost on a nation where the sun shone a lot more than it did in Britain. Ariel made every effort to rectify the situation by stripping down the leader to create the Arrow and the Sports Arrow, but still the Americans refused to look at a bike that had strange front forks and appeared to lack a frame. It is for this reason that the aerial leader remains a peculiar Great British classic, but way ahead of its time. This machine was indeed the predecessor of many of today's modern touring machines, which are so popular all over the world, and especially in America. And for this collector of classic motorcycles, he's very glad to have found an aerial leader tucked away in a scrapyard all those years ago. The future for this machine is assured thanks to his efforts, a real legacy for the motorcycle enthusiasts of tomorrow. Yet this is not the end of the aerial road, thanks to classic motorcycle enthusiasts like the ones who've taken part in this programme. The quality of the engineering and the simple elegance of the designs of Val Page, Edward Turner and Bert Hopwood have ensured that the aerials produced in the Selly Oak factory would survive the test of time. These motorcycles truly are a vivid reminder of a bygone age, and although undoubtedly precious treasures to their owners, they're also extremely important in terms of social history. The aerial story is one of motorcycles, engines and technology, but it also charts the history of industrial Britain through the 20th century. Mention the name BSA, and images of classic motorcycles will instantly spring to mind. But this is a company that has a historic heritage dating back to a time when horses rather than horsepower dominated transportation. BSA actually stands for the Birmingham Small Arms Company, and it was instigated in 1854 when 14 Birmingham gunsmiths joined together to supply arms for the Crimean War. The union was formalised in 1861, but in peacetime the demand for guns gave way to more gentle pursuits, and by 1880 BSA had moved with the times to build bicycles. By the end of the 19th century, motorised transport was evidently going to be the way forward. And in 1903, BSA motorised bicycles started to appear, quickly followed by their first real motorcycle in 1910. Then the storm clouds of war gathered over BSA once more, and at the outbreak of World War I in 1914, production of motorcycles ceased as guns were again manufactured. When the war came to an end in 1918, BSA turned their attention back to motorcycles, and by the 1930s, real progress was being made with BSA's world-famous Star series. The Blue Star was quickly followed by the Empire Star, and eventually the Star definitely turned to gold. This was the heyday of motorcycle racing, and when Walter Handley won the 1937 Brooklands Gold Star on a 500cc Empire Star, the future production of a 350cc and 500cc machine took the Gold Star name, and these BSAs proved to be a huge success with motorcycling enthusiasts everywhere. As the 1930s drew to a close, a Second World War became inevitable, and although motorcycle production continued, BSA's Allied war effort was considerable as they manufactured munitions, shell fuses, and a folding bicycle. Reliability was crucial during the conflict, overseas and on the home front, and BSA's military M20SV proved to be just that, with over 126,000 machines manufactured. Sadly, BSA suffered direct hits during the German bombing raids of Britain, damaging premises, destroying machine tools, and worst of all, killing 53 employees. Between the two world wars, BSA had become the biggest motorcycle manufacturer on a global scale, and claimed that 1 in 4 motorcycles on Britain's roads were BSAs. It was a success that they built upon throughout World War II, and in the post-war 1940s and 50s. Despite storming into the 1960s with massive profits, BSA made the same error as their fellow British motorcycle manufacturers by failing to keep up with the times. With little investment in new technology at a time when Japanese imports were becoming highly competitive, in just a decade, BSA was facing financial disaster. In 1971, the company was swallowed up by the government-funded Norton Villiers, and by 1973, it appeared that BSA had reached the end of the road. Yet the BSA legacy is still very much alive and well today in the world of classic motorcycles, with much loved and cherished machines saved and restored for posterity. There have been attempts to revive the Gold Star, but for the purposes of this programme, we'll now take a ride down memory lane to enjoy the sights and sounds of a BSA blast from the past. When this delightful motorcycle first left the company's Birmingham factory, BSA held the ever-expanding motorcycle industry in the palm of its giant conglomerate hand and wouldn't let go. The slogan of the time, being emblazoned on adverts all over the country, was "1 in 4 is a BSA." And this was a boast that was more than backed up by sales statistics and brand loyalty. Many reasons are given for BSA's total stranglehold on this booming market, but the main one seems to be that they simply understood the market they were aiming for. They realised that the needs of the public were for basic, reliable, undemanding machines that would comfortably get the rider from point A to point B without breaking down. The example we have here is a very rare motorbike indeed, of which a limited run were produced. It is a BSA G30 1000cc V-twin with a fixed cylinder head that became available in 1930. This motorbike had the immense power of the machines used for sidecar production, but without the added weight and stability of an attached sidecar itself. In fact, the popular mystery writer of the time, Dorothy L. Sayers, the Oxford University-educated creator of the Lord Peter Wimsey series of detective novels and advocate of women's motorcycling, regularly wrote about motorbike and sidecar combinations, and for that matter, all types of motorcycles, in her novels and short stories. The sidecar was rarely viewed with the same respect that the solo motorcycles enjoyed, and this practical addition to such a fine machine as this classic BSA was often mocked for its practicality, as this amusing anecdote from the 1930s demonstrates. The sidecar, even in those days, tended to be a dead end as a form of transport. A young man with a solo machine would add on a pillion for his girlfriend and later his wife. When the first child came along, there would have to be a decision: sidecar or four wheels. If economy dictated the sidecar, then four wheels moved still further into the distance. Solo riders passed him with amused sympathy. Poor devil, got married. Motorists passed with amused understanding. Poor devil, can't run a car. And the police would not bother him. Poor devil, got enough on his plate already. The fact that this BSA 1000cc motorbike was sold without a sidecar makes it a powerhouse of a machine with a huge top speed for the era. In 1930, when this beautiful big bike became available, the national speed limit of 20 miles per hour was abolished in the Road Traffic Act, allowing motorbikes of this size and calibre to be bought and ridden by the average man in the street. Machines of this size had been produced and sold before, but only to be used in amateur racing, or the clubman scene as it was more commonly known. In Europe, motor racing took place on public roads, but this had been outlawed in the United Kingdom. This was why the popular TT races were held on the Isle of Man and not the mainland. By the time of the 1930 Road Traffic Act, which took away the 20 miles per hour restriction, the TT was firmly established as a Manx event and still remains so to this day. 1930 was also the year that the Metropolitan Police of London, England, established a motorcycle squad using BSA and Matchless machines. In fact, looking through the documentation of the time, the Northampton Divisional Police Force created its own mobile special constabulary, and they bought 4 of the BSA G30 1000cc motorbikes with the strong V-twin engine, just like the model seen here. They were purchased from Percy Spokes, an appropriate name for the agent selling these BSA motorbikes, who had premises in Henry Street, just off Kettering Road in Northampton itself. Of course, it's a little known fact, but just like the author and rider Dorothy L. Sayers, the first police officers to use motorcycles were actually women. The BSA G30 is a glorious machine, generously lightweight in its design, with sculptured flowing lines, fluted mudguards, and a simple but effective elegance. This particular rare example is jokingly described by its owner as the BSA made in Poland. As with many classic motorcycles, there's a great story behind this nickname, due to the fact that shortly after buying this BSA, the owner was stranded after a breakdown whilst touring Poland. As is often the case on such occasions, a group of local motorcycling enthusiasts seemed to appear from nowhere. Overnight, they opened up a nearby factory, especially to help repair this magnificent machine. In all, 23 Polish Good Samaritans rebuilt it, and none of them could speak much more than a few words of English. When next morning the owner was presented with his repaired motorcycle, he was delighted and politely asked what he owed them. The reply was nicht, or as we would say, nothing. However, there was a proviso. If anyone ever asked about the motorcycle, and needless to say many people do, he was to say that it was a BSA made in Poland. Far from being a hardship, this owner has enjoyed telling the story on numerous occasions, particularly as that all-night motorcycle repair stint happened over 14 years ago, and this lovely old BSA is still running on the parts that those generous enthusiasts from Poland put in all that time ago. So, not only is this BSA an absolute delight to watch out on the open road, you can also be sure that this particular model is absolutely unique. The BSA Gold Star shines brightly in the annals of motorcycle history. This classic machine had its origins way back in 1937, just before the advent of the Second World War. Up until this point, the Empire Star had been the company's best-loved speed machine, and as if to prove the point, a 500cc Empire Star took racer Walter Handley to a famous victory at Brooklands. The following year, a replica machine was created for sale to the general public, and quite naturally, calling it a Gold Star made very good marketing sense. The name Gold Star wasn't only chosen because it reflected Walter Handley's speedy achievements. It was also used because it showed the public that these motorcycles were of the highest quality that BSA could manufacture. They were built out of carefully selected components, tuned and bench tested, with polished valve ports, conrods, flywheels and crankcases. An aluminium cylinder head and barrel was something that had never been seen on a mass-produced motorbike before, and this was a big selling point for the Gold Star. Handley's initial 500cc monster of a machine had quietly metamorphosed into a tidy, oil-tight pushrod single, which was sold initially as a sports bike, but always with racing in mind. So much so that from 1939 onwards, road ratios in the gearbox were optional extras. This was a motorbike that came stripped down and ready for action. With the arrival of the Second World War, production shut down as the terrors of mass fighting, the fears of constant bombing, and the pain of senseless killing caused the people of Britain to think of more fundamental issues than a pleasurable ride around the countryside on an expensive motorcycle. However, once the Second World War had come to a close, BSA immediately started working on a post-war Gold Star machine. The very first of these Gold Stars was not on sale to the general public immediately. Amateur racing caught the first glimpse of them in competition, and they were clearly visible in the 1947 Manx Grand Prix and 1948 Clubman's TT. The 1950s were an amazing decade for BSA, which saw them become the biggest motorcycle manufacturer in the world. They produced over 75,000 bikes in 1 year alone. At the start of the decade, the 350cc was slightly revamped, with a larger 8-inch front drum brake, and 2 years later, due to a few minor detail improvements, the 350cc's Gold Stars could easily exceed 95 miles per hour without breaking into an oily sweat. The frame changed too, and became an all-welded construction of single top tube and a duplex cradle under the engine. An effective swing arm suspension was added to the rear, and by 1954, with more tinkering taking place, the 350cc Gold Star achieved that elusive ton. 100 miles per hour was now the standard. The first win for the 350 machines in the 1949 Isle of Man Clubman's TT gave BSA a taste for success, and this powerful beauty continued to dominate the race until 1956. In the final year of racing, due to the 350 series being discontinued, only 2 of the racers in that particular field rode anything other than a BSA Gold Star. This was truly an amazing tribute to this universally acclaimed motorcycle. As the 1960s dawned, people began to realise that they'd never had it so good, and the whole world seemed to be switched on to free love, peace and freedom, and all everyone seemed to want to do was travel. There was a common desire to escape mundane surroundings, break away from convention and explore new lands and sights. This was a time when you could set out on the highway, look for some adventure, and whatever came your way, to paraphrase a popular song of the time. BSA motorcycles of this era came into their own, with a psychedelic army of lightweight singles, which were sold by the bucket load because of the thousands of new young riders. The particular example we have here is the BSA B40, which looks resplendent in home office livery, as this motorcycle was used for the auxiliary fire service. These single-cylinder, overhead valve, 4-stroke motorbikes were perfect for the first-time buyer, and also ideal for the new sport of off-road racing. Indeed, it is said that the BSA lightweight trials models of the 1960s created the modern phenomenon of off-road sport. The BSA 40 grew out of the perennially popular C15 model of the late 1950s. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, BSA came up with some positively explosive names for their motorcycles: Thunderbolt, Lightning, Firebird, Hornet and Spitfire expressed the mood of the moment, and as the real possibility of landing a man on the moon was transformed from science fiction into the NASA space program, BSA came up with the Rocket, one of the best-loved motorcycles of all time. This is a BSA Super Rocket 650cc that was manufactured in 1959. But the first rockets were actually launched some 5 years earlier in 1954. The brief for the designers at BSA had been to come up with a motorcycle that would appeal to the tastes of the American riders, and the Rocket did just that. Quickly nicknamed the Missile with Muscle, the model sold very well in America, but BSA would probably have been pleasantly surprised at the very favourable response the bike got from British motorcyclists, as a great many Rockets were actually sold on both sides of the Atlantic. The all-new, improved Super Rocket was introduced in 1957 to build upon this success, and with a price tag of just over £1,000, it was certainly at the more exclusive end of the market. The technical specification included a 650cc overhead valve twin engine with racing valves and springs. There was an Amel TT Racing carburettor, Super Sports camshaft, and the engine was advertised as having been tuned at the Birmingham factory for maximum horsepower output. In fact, the tagline claimed that the Super Rocket was for the highway rider who wants the response of a competition-type twin. In the late 1950s, the Super Rocket had exceptional power, but was nevertheless perfectly at home out on the open road or in congested traffic. So often at this time, low-end performance was sacrificed to gain power, but not in this case, and with well-designed lines and enough chromium to positively outshine the competition, the Super Rocket was as aesthetically pleasing as it was fast. In the post-World War II years, BSA worked consistently to improve rider comfort, and the Super Rocket boasted a cushy dual seat that offered the ultimate in easy rides. The seating positions for rider and passenger were good with easily operated controls. When it came to gear changing, even the most demanding enthusiast was delighted with the gearbox, as shifting up or down at any speed could be achieved with smooth efficiency. The huge TT carburettor was very responsive to the twist grip, but there was a price to pay for potent power at your fingertips. Petrol consumption was in direct relation to speed, and although the less adventurous rider could lower consumption with careful riding, those concerned about economy rather than speed were unlikely to choose a rocket to project them around the countryside. It's one thing to get up to speed in the shortest amount of time possible, but quite another to stop with the same precision. However, the super rocket was never found lacking in the braking department. Whether applied singly or in unison, the missile with muscle could be brought to a standstill safely and efficiently without a hint of grab or shudder. A closer look at this super rocket's design will reveal a totally enclosed rear chain that helps to keep the back of the bike clean. The generous chromium plating is not only pleasing to the eye, but also protects the tank, fenders, fender stays, exhaust pipes and mufflers, making polishing a pleasure rather than a chore. The handlebars are set quite wide, which explains the Americans' interest in this motorcycle, as it doesn't take a great deal of imagination to visualize the super rocket cruising down a Californian highway. And of course, the added bonus of performance that could handle a coast-to-coast trip across the states played its part too, particularly as this roaring beast could be tamed instantly to comfortably transport the workers of Britain to their places of employment through rush hour traffic. All in all, the BSA Super Rocket owner was indeed happy with his lot, and the company's skillful combination of utility and enjoyment made this a motorcycle that has very definitely stood the test of time, despite the fact that the same could not be said for BSA as a company. As our time looking at classic BSA motorcycles draws to a close, it's hard to understand why such an iconic and financially successful company failed to survive beyond the 1970s. When you remember the remarkable star models and Walter Handley's great achievements for BSA on the racetrack, plus the introduction of other timeless classics such as the diminutive Bantam, the A7, A10 and the C15, it's difficult to work out how things have gone so badly wrong. However, BSA were not alone in this respect, because the problems that beset them were the same difficulties faced by the British motorcycle industry in general. The late 1930s witnessed the evolution of AMC, associated motorcycles, and, in theory, the merging of small companies together, in this case Matchless, AJS, Francis Barnett and James, seemed to make a great deal of sense. Meantime, BSA had become the largest motorcycle company in the world, and began a series of acquisitions of their own. They acquired Sunbeam from the newly formed AMC, took over Ariel, one of the greatest names in British motorcycle history, and by 1951 were in the enviable position of buying Triumph. As BSA's major competitor, AMC were also busy in the takeover market, winning the prize of Norton for their conglomeration. The British motorcycle industry had changed beyond all recognition. Gone were the small concerns often run as family businesses, with their talented engineers, creative designers and unadulterated passion for speed. As the years passed, the boardrooms of these mighty industrial giants filled with businessmen who knew nothing of motorcycle design or production, and the consequence was a complete failure to innovate. Even BSA, with its past glories and massive profits, went into a decline as the Japanese manufacturers, such as Suzuki and Yamaha, took full advantage of the situation, importing state-of-the-art, low-cost machines into 1960s Britain. AMC went bankrupt in 1966 and were taken over by Manganese Bronze Holdings, while BSA battled on until they were absorbed by the same consortium to form the Norton Villiers Triumph Group in 1971. Incredibly, BSA, the biggest single manufacturer of them all, was lost and consigned to the history books, and only Triumph, the company bought by BSA in the 1950s, has survived to produce great British motorcycles in the 21st century. But it's not all doom and gloom, thanks to the many classic motorcycle enthusiasts that delight in tracking down ancient and decaying BSA machines and bringing them back to life. As you've seen during the course of this programme, the BSAs of the past are in very safe hands, which means that new generations of future motorcycle enthusiasts have a very fine legacy to inherit. For motorcycling enthusiasts today, hoping to find a classic British motorcycle of the future, the choice is pretty much limited to the Triumph models, literally resurrected in the latter part of the 20th century by visionary businessman John Bloor. It's a sad indictment of an industry that once boasted as many as 700 motorcycle manufacturers. But it's a tradition that thankfully lives on with the riders and restorers of classic British motorcycles who refuse to let the nation's best loved transport heritage die. Twice in the 20th century, World War halted the progress of motorcycle development, and on both occasions, in 1914 and 1939, the manufacturers turned over their production lines to the war effort. The years between the two world wars proved to be the golden age of the British motorcycle, with innovative new designs launched on a regular basis. Nevertheless, the Wall Street crash and Great Depression that blighted America also hit hard in Britain, and many of the smaller companies disappeared almost without trace. Those that survived grew stronger and more competitive in a marketplace full of enthusiastic motorcyclists ready to put the latest models to the test. This should have been the perfect platform for the British motorcycle industry to build upon for the future. But during the 1950s and 60s, this great legacy was squandered with poor management at a time when Japanese competition was positively overwhelming. Yet this is a celebration of the classic British motorcycle rather than a lament for its passing. So, without further preamble, it's time to take to the open road to enjoy the sights, sounds and thrills of a bygone age. There is something truly magnificent in the lines of a classic Triumph motorcycle. Even the Hollywood film industry favours the Triumph above the homegrown Harley Davidson, with such heroes as James Dean, Steve McQueen and Marlon Brando all recorded for celluloid posterity riding Triumphs. It's been said in Hollywood that the man who saves the world rides a Triumph motorcycle, and we certainly wouldn't argue with that, although our riders today, for this programme, would always modestly claim that the motorcycles are the true stars of the show. The story of Triumph has far humbler beginnings and dates back to 1887, when Siegfried Bettmann founded the Triumph Cycle Company in Coventry to manufacture bicycles. With the coming of motorised transport at the turn of the century, Triumph produced their first powered motorcycles in 1902, and by 1905, the factory output reached 500 motorcycles per year. The Triumph reputation grew steadily, and when World War I broke out in 1914, the trusty Triumph was supplied to the Allied forces. Interestingly, Colonel Claude Holbrook, who procured motorcycles for the War Office, later joined Triumph as general manager in 1919. Throughout the 1920s, Triumph enjoyed constant growth, acquiring an automobile division, with cars and motorcycles produced under the same banner until 1935, when the two were split. The storm clouds of war were yet again gathering, and at the outbreak of hostilities in 1939, Triumph once more had a part to play in the nation's defence. During the Second World War, the government took nearly all of the motorcycles manufactured by Triumph, and even when the factory at Coventry was destroyed in the Blitz, output continued from alternative sites at Warwick and then Meriden. The post-war years saw Triumph work its way back into the civilian marketplace, but by 1951 they'd been taken over by BSA motorcycles. However, the Triumph name was retained, and the company remained a separate concern under the BSA umbrella. Triumph faced the threat of new Japanese imports through the 1960s, and by the 1970s, the once hugely successful BSA parent company was facing financial ruin. BSA merged with Norton Villiers, and the new Norton Villiers Triumph was sponsored by the government of the day. But when it was announced that the Triumph plant at Meriden was to close, there was a workers' sit-in that brought production to a halt. Eventually, the Meriden Workers' Cooperative was formed, but despite further government support, the cooperative went into liquidation in 1983. This could have been the end for Triumph, but rescue came in the person of John Blaw, an English property developer, who injected new life into the old classic. Unlike such British motorcycle giants as BSA, Norton, Royal Enfield and Ariel, all consigned in the most part to the history books, Triumph had a future thanks to inspiration and investment. By the 1990s, production was back on track, and today Triumph remains at the forefront of modern motorcycling. Yet there's nothing quite like a touch of nostalgia to thrill and delight. In 1907, just after the turn of a brand new century, with technology advancing in leaps and bounds, Triumph began to be known as true pioneers in the field of motorcycling. This 3.5 horsepower, 500cc machine is acknowledged more than any other model or make built within the same time frame as being hugely influential in the blossoming motorcycle industry. Triumph undoubtedly helped influence the mass acceptance of the motorcycle, which was still looked at with suspicion and fear by the general public before this model. Triumph was quick to exploit the new marketplace and went into production on a grand scale, making motorcycles like the one you see here an aspirational commodity. Of course, it helped a great deal that the popular Isle of Man TT race was won in 1908 by this single-cylinder side-valve motorbike. This boosted the sales of the Triumph Roadster enormously, and a special TT Roadster soon appeared in the trade catalogues of 1909. The continued reliability of these early models off the production line soon led to later models becoming known as trusty Triumphs. This reliability, coupled with a nifty turn of speed, came from some solid engineering work that gained the company a great reputation that they still hold to this day. The belt-driven Roadster had a 3-speed rear hub that was similar to the ones used on the ordinary pedal bicycles. The difference here was that it was fitted with a clutch incorporated into this very hub. A twin-barrel carburettor of Triumph's own design was fitted in 1908, in the year of the Isle of Man TT race win, and a magneto system. As was the case with these early motorised bicycles, the weight of construction was very light indeed, coming in at around 175 pounds. The engine was a simple side-valve design, which managed a comfortable 499cc and a top speed of 55 miles per hour, and used a direct belt drive to the rear wheel as mentioned before. The hub gear and clutch made for a much easier life than the alternative fixed gear, which meant a run and bump start after every stop. The Isle of Man TT race was a great advertisement for the continued sales success of the Triumph Roadster 3.5 horsepower model. Not only did this machine win the single-cylinder category in 1908, but it also managed to be placed well in the 1909 and 1910 TT races too. This kept the Triumph name in the public eye and allowed the sales figures to steadily climb into profitability. In 1911, a motorcyclist called Ivan Hart Davies proved the endurance and reliability of this Triumph Roadster beyond any reasonable doubt. He completed the famous route from Land's End in Cornwall to John O'Groats in Scotland. John O'Groats is the furthest village from Land's End on the British mainland, an end-to-end route with both points separated by 876 miles. The name of John O'Groats derives from Jan de Groot, one of 3 brothers who arrived in the area in 1496, with a commission from King James IV to operate a ferry between the mainland and the remote island of Orkney. The name of Land's End, way down south of John O'Groats, is, to be honest, rather self-explanatory. Ivan Hart Davies, riding his trusty Triumph Roadster, managed this colossal distance in just less than 30 hours, and it was the very last time such a record non-stop run was permitted. This wonderful old Triumph was the flagship of the industry, building on the standard set by the earliest 3 horsepower model, which had been produced for just a 2-year run between 1905 and 1907 before being succeeded by this more advanced machine. The capacity had been increased by over 163cc, and the improvements were all in the detail. The new Roadster ran for a longer period than its immediate predecessor, with an unbroken 7-year run from 1907 through to 1914. It was the machine that set the stamp for the Triumph Engineering Company Limited, and also prepared the public for the sonic sound of the motorcycle boom. The Triumph 100 was the most successful of the medium-range motorbikes that Triumph developed and produced both pre-Second World War and post-Second World War. The 2 examples we have here represent both of those eras in the Triumph Tiger 100's history. The Triumph Tiger was introduced to the general public in 1938, and it created a truly sensational buzz. Previously, it had been used for 12 months as a touring model to help iron out any irregularities and mechanical problems that might have developed. This was a policy thought up by Edward Turner, managing director of Triumph and also their chief designer. He believed that the sports model should be as close to perfect as it was humanly possible to achieve when it went on general sale, and this inspired thinking put Triumph ahead of the game when it came to any competition. The British press raved about this amazing machine, the public clamoured to buy them, and Triumph had the template of a motorcycle that they'd be building and modifying for the next 3 decades. The first batch of Tiger 100s were just a sportier version of the touring model, with a bigger and stronger cylinder base. This was accompanied by a gas-flowed cylinder head and a compression ratio of 8:1. The forged flat-top pistons had valve cutaways in the crown to accommodate the very impressive 7,000 revs per minute which could be achieved at full throttle. The parallel twin-engine characterised development in the British motorcycle industry from the 1930s right through until the 1960s. Originally, the Triumph Tiger 100 was simply intended for clubman racing, as it was fitted with a detachable silencer that allowed the tailpipe, end cap and baffle to be manually removed by the owner. This gave an amplified roar from the engine, rather like sticking the exhaust next to a megaphone, and was simply to impress other riders and racers. Clubman racing was purely sport-orientated, with riders competing just for the fun of it, rather than for prize money or trophies that may have been on offer by the organising club. It was very popular in the early years of motorcycling on testing tracks when gentlemen racers would pit their strength, agility and handling skills against each other for nothing more than the thrill of the chase. The Tiger 100s were very popular in this field of clubman racing, and the first run of these speedy machines were an instant success for the dedicated enthusiast and the general public alike. After such a grand mass testing at clubman level, Triumph took note of the minor quibbles and suggestions and added a full skirt piston to their existing model. They also decided to add check springs on the stiff girder front fork to allow it more give, and a handy speedometer was placed on the tank that showed the rider a gear-by-gear revs per minute scale. However, it was not long after these additions that the production of the Tiger 100 model metaphorically skidded off the track, hit a safety wall of tyres, and came to an abrupt stop. The popularity of these fast-paced 498cc twins, with their pre-unit construction of separated engine and gearbox, was never in any doubt. But the advent of the horrific and brutal Second World War saw factories and raw materials used in the building of motorbikes turned over to military use. This Tiger 100 model, that was produced in the same year as the atrocities of war began, would have been a rare sight to see gliding around the countryside, especially once petrol rationing kicked in. It truly was a marvel of modern engineering for the time, and it's easy to see why so many people fell in love with it. When the Second World War came to a close, and VE Day heralded victory for the Allied forces against Nazi Germany in 1945, the British nation were eager to celebrate and get back to the peaceful and prosperous way of life that had been the normal routine of the 1930s. Triumph had already begun production of their post-war range of the Tiger 100 before the celebrations had even begun, in their new factory at Meriden in the West Midlands. They were soon rattling out their own metaphorical Triumph big guns once the real shooting had finally stopped. When the first post-war Tiger 100 models were released for sale to the public at large, there were a lot of subtle differences to these magnificent machines. The pre-war model, as we've just seen, was an entirely different beast. The newer models had telescopic forks rather than stiff girders, and the look and appearance of the crankcase had undergone a major revamp too. This resulted in there now being a separate magneto and dynamo at the front and rear of the motorbike, instead of the earlier Mag-Dyno combined electrics. Although the Tiger we're now looking at is of 1960s vintage, there were further significant developments in the years between these two machines. The big clamour from the motorcycling enthusiasts during peacetime was the need for rear springing to increase the comfort in riding the new Tiger 100. This would have required a major frame redesign, which was out of the financial budget of Triumph at the time, especially after the cutbacks and poor economy of the immediate post-war months. However, they were always mindful to listen to their loyal customer base, and so a large diameter hub, containing its own springing system, was added instead. This was called the sprung hub, and became part of the rigid frame for an extra £20 on the purchase price. This did the trick for the time being and saved Triumph a fortune in new production costs without shortchanging their customers. The Triumph Tiger 100 ran from the late 1930s until the late 1960s and was beloved by everyone who owned one. It was an unashamedly populist motorbike which appealed across the board. When it roared, you listened. When it purred, you wanted to stroke it. When it bit, it left marks. This was a real tiger of a motorcycle. The Triumph Bonneville is arguably the most famous Triumph ever made. In 1959, the Triumph Bonneville T120 model was produced in response to public demand. At that time, America was Triumph's biggest market, which is no doubt what Edward Turner, the man responsible for naming the bike, had in mind when he called it Bonneville, in honour of Johnny Allen's record-breaking attempts on the famous Utah Salt Flats. The popular Triumph T100 was the design on which the T120 was based, with added twin carburettors, a single-piece camshaft and splayed inlet ports. The demand had been created by performance-minded riders customising their T100s with a twin carburettor conversion, so it was only natural that Triumph would want to get in on the action and actually make these riders buy a new version rather than update an old one. The very first production run of the T120 still bore the same shape and silhouette of the T100, which caused initial problems. The powerful 649cc engine, with a peak output of 46 brake horsepower at 6,500 revs per minute, could achieve an easy 115 miles per hour, and this created too many wobbles and vibrations for the less sturdy chassis of its immediate predecessor. In the 1959 catalogue, there was no Bonneville to be seen, as it had been rushed through production so quickly that the publicity office got caught unawares. However, in the hastily produced brochure and promotional material, Triumph trumpeted their new T120 Bonneville with some pretty high claims. The best motorcycle in the world, they boasted. The Bonneville 120 offers the highest performance available today from a standard production motorcycle, was a brave statement, and Triumph categorically insisted that this is the motorcycle for the really knowledgeable enthusiast who can appreciate and use the power provided. However, despite the Americans being the ones pressurizing Triumph to design and produce a twin carburettor 650, the look of the bike was off-putting for the average motorcyclist. The T100's headlamp, heavy mudguards and swept-back touring handlebars, which came as a package with the initial frame, were not particularly sporty-looking, and in 1960 they were dropped altogether. The frame was revamped with a twin cradle design and new forks, sportier mudguards, a separate headlamp was added, as was a better saddle. The 1960 T120 Bonneville was the real deal and made the cash registers ring at a respectable £285. In 1971, this great motorcycle was replaced by a larger 750 model, the T140 Bonneville, consigning the T120 to the history books. But this is nevertheless a classic motorcycle that will never be forgotten. The Triumph TR6 Trophy is probably best known for being the motorcycle from the World War II prisoner of war movie The Great Escape. It was the high-flying machine, a 1961 model, that almost allowed famously cool film legend Steve McQueen to avoid recapture after escaping from a prisoner of war camp. In real life, Steve McQueen owned 200 motorbikes, and Triumph was one of his favourite manufacturers. In 1961, Triumph launched the TR6 Trophy, which was an upgrade from the sporty 498cc TR5. Whereas the TR5 was designed primarily for racing, the TR6 had a distinct leaning towards the open road rather than the oval racetrack. Edward Turner, Chief Designer and Managing Director of Triumph Engineering Company Limited, had never been happy that the TR5 had been developed, designed and prepared in his absence and without his initial consent. He was a man who was opposed to racing, even though it created so much success for Triumph and helped sell so many motorbikes. So when it came to the TR6 Trophy, he kept a watchful eye on production. Essentially, the TR6 Trophy was almost identical to the popular Triumph Bonneville, but this new bike had a single 30mm carburettor instead. Although the Bonneville outsold this new version, popular opinion amongst classic bike enthusiasts today suggests that the TR6 was actually the better machine. They cite the sleeker and more stylish design, coupled with the low revving flexibility and the cleaner carburation. 2 years later, in 1963, the TR6 Trophy, along with the different engine-sized Triumph Bonnevilles, became a one-unit machine, with the construction of a combined engine and gearbox, instead of them both being separate, and it also received a new coil ignition too. The production of the Triumph TR6 Trophy ran right up until 1983, but by then it had been sadly neutered by a reduction in engine size to 600cc, and these were never as popular. There were many variants of the TR6 during its years in production, but it essentially stayed looking the same. The thick saddle seat joining to the classically shaped fuel tank and the sleek, elegant styling of the exhaust all make this unmistakably a Triumph. As our time enjoying these classic Triumph motorcycles draws to a close, this mark of all the great British classics has the rare distinction of still being in production. There's over 100 years of history behind Triumph as a privately owned British company, and that same philosophy, responsible for the creation of such iconic motorcycles as the Bonneville, Rocket, Thunderbird and Tiger, is still very much alive and well, and manufacturing motorcycles that will become the design classics of the future. The principle is the same as it's always been, with a steady commitment to producing unique motorcycles that are distinctive in looks, design and performance. Whichever model is chosen, a vintage or modern Triumph will deliver a great riding experience through the fusion of a well-balanced, easy-to-handle chassis and strong, flexible engines. Nevertheless, however laudable such principles undoubtedly are, in terms of the British motorcycle industry, this is far from being rocket science. There were many of Triumph's contemporaries who were equally as innovative and produced, some would argue, much better motorcycles. Why then did Triumph survive, while such great names as Norton, Vincent, Royal Enfield, BSA and Ariel fall by the wayside? It's a fascinating question, and to find the answer we need to look at three major incidents in the 20th century that quite literally changed the world. The First World War, fought between 1914 and 1918, forced the fast-developing motorcycle industry to put any innovations on hold. The armed forces required thousands of motorcycles, and reliability combined with durability was far more important than speed and performance. Manufacturers that rose to the challenge flourished, and the trusty Triumph was no exception. It's interesting to note that before World War I, the Rex was known as the king of motorcycles, and the British company that manufactured them was much larger than Triumph. However, Rex did not secure any military contracts and consequently struggled for survival in the post-war years. Undoubtedly, the years after World War I were the most innovative and successful that the British motorcycle industry would ever know, and Triumph went from strength to strength. But just as the world of commerce was getting back to normal, the Depression hit, and the British motorcycle industry once more faced a drastic fall in sales. Many companies ceased trading, but Triumph, along with the reduced number of motorcycle manufacturers who survived the Depression, forged ahead competitively. Triumph had weathered the storm, and when World War II broke out in 1939, the company once more turned to military contracts for the 5-year duration of the hostilities. Again, it was the motorcycle companies that produced machines for the armed forces that strengthened their positions, and BSA were able to take over Triumph in the early 1950s, due in part to their wartime successes. Ironically, it was Triumph that survived, whilst BSA, along with associated motorcycles, failed to stand the test of time. When Rudyard Kipling spoke of triumph and disaster in the same breath in his great poem If, his words had an appropriate resonance for the Triumph Motorcycle Company. Triumph had stood so close to disaster throughout its more than a century of trading, yet each time it has survived. The motorcycles featured in this programme are a tribute to that endurance, because at the end of the day, with a name like Triumph, perhaps failure is simply not an option. When it comes to British motorcycles, the name of Norton has always been synonymous with performance and style. Like so many British motorcycle manufacturers, the company's roots were firmly established in the bicycle industry and in the Midlands. James Lansdowne Norton of Birmingham began the Norton Manufacturing Company in 1898, making chains and other items for bicycles, the greatest transport innovation of the day. But the need for speed is evidently not a modern phenomenon, because in 1902, the first Norton motorbike was produced when an engine was added to a bicycle frame. It was a revolution indeed, and progress was unstoppable. The advent of motorsport was inspirational to Norton, and when one of his motorcycles, complete with a Peugeot engine, won the first ever TT race on the Isle of Man in 1907, the company expanded into the newly evolving transport marketplace. This is Harrods in London's fashionable Knightsbridge, and if you'd wanted to purchase a Norton motorcycle in 1909, you could have bought one from here. There was a choice of 8 models, but despite the popularity of the new motoring craze, Norton struggled as a business. The man responsible for giving his name to these motorcycles was a very good engineer, but not so skilled as an entrepreneur, and by 1913 the company faced bankruptcy. Fortunately, one of the main creditors stepped in to save the day and formed Norton Motors Limited, allowing manufacturing to continue. Between 1914 and 1918, Norton's factory was kept busy with contracts for World War I, supplying motorcycles for the Russian army, Great Britain's allies. The company needed to move to larger premises in the Aston area of Birmingham, and it was at this time that the now famous Norton logo started to appear. As peace followed the war that was supposed to end all wars, James Norton fulfilled his dream of creating an overhead valve machine. The Model 18 first appeared in 1922 and quickly became established as one of the fastest motorcycles around. These were the golden years of the British motorcycling industry, as racing, whether in the TT on the Isle of Man or the Brooklands Road Special, put every new design to the test. James Norton died in 1925 at the age of 56, but his legacy lived on when a new design with an overhead camshaft helped the company to dominate the racing circuits of Britain and Europe for the next 25 years. However, the war to end all wars proved to have offered false hope. World War II broke out in 1939, and during the 6 years of the conflict, more than 100,000 Nortons were manufactured for military use, as production of the rest of the range was suspended. In the post-war years, such classics as the Dominator and the Commando all added to Norton's credibility. But the 1953 takeover by Associated Motorcycles Limited set a downward trend from which the British motorcycle industry, and inevitably Norton, would never fully recover. But that's quite enough history to be going on with, so let's take a step back in time to Norton's heyday and enjoy a priceless selection of the very best of British bikes. The Norton 16H has been an Isle of Man TT racer, a family transport sidecar holder, and a wartime dispatch rider within its 33-year history. Like the other Norton motorcycles of its era, this machine was stamped with incredible longevity and a proud tradition. The Model 16, as it was originally called, was very similar in design and specifications to the very first Norton ever built, the Big 4, which was a particular favourite of James Lansdowne Norton, the founder of the company. The main difference between the two was the 16H used a smaller engine, but with the same 79mm x 100mm dimensions. The 490cc single-cylinder side-valve four-stroke engine managed a top speed of around 80 miles per hour with an external valve gear. The Big 4 frame was also used on the 16H, but this had an extraordinarily high clearance from the ground. To distinguish between models, the 16H frame was redesigned to have a lower ground clearance, and this became known as the home model for travelling around England, and this is what the H in its name derived from. Because James Lansdowne Norton had travelled around South Africa on a Big 4 and noted how the roads were different in the outer reaches of the British Empire, the high ground clearance frames came to be known as colonial models for riding abroad. World War I intervened in the production and development of the 16H model, and it wasn't until 1919 that a Norton 490cc engine acquired a chain drive with a 3-speed gearbox. A saddle tank eventually replaced the flat tank of the earlier 16H models in 1929, and the frame went through several carefully designed and up-to-date changes in order to make it more aerodynamic and aesthetically pleasing. During the 1930s, a few more changes took place. These included the change of the position of the exhaust pipe, which switched from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. This was quickly followed by a new 4-speed gearbox, which replaced the 3-speed one, and had been available on other Norton models for a few years previously. Because the 16H was a relatively cheap motorcycle to produce, without the quality, reliability, or assured road handling ability being diminished, it soon caught the eye of the British Army. As the approach of an impending Second World War dominated the whole of the United Kingdom, Norton's factory in Birmingham, deep in the heart of the Midlands, began producing a military version of the Model 16H for possible use in the war. Taking the engine from the 1937 version, with an open valve gear and a high ground clearance frame with crankcase shield, and stripping it down to the bare essentials in case of off-road action, this military version of the 16H was capable of taking all the abuse that a rider or a terrain could throw at it. The buffer stops on the forks and the lower overall gearing enabled the rider to travel across smooth or rough ground with equal power and balance. Up to 100,000 of these military 16H machines were delivered and used during the entirety of the Second World War, which started in 1939 and ended in 1945. The military 16H motorcycles were painted in accordance with which branch of the military they were issued to. The Army had olive green or khaki. The Royal Air Force had light blue paintwork, whereas the Navy had a deeper and darker blue. Some of the specially built and military-tested 16H machines even stayed in Army service well into the 1950s. Such was their ease for mechanics to maintain and for soldiers to master. The Norton 16H finally ceased production alongside all the other side-valve engine motorcycles in 1954. It had played a big part in the Second World War, and for that alone, it'll always be guaranteed a place in history. The Norton 500T Competition is a beautiful machine, with a look that combines classic roadster with classic off-roadster. It is essentially a trials motorbike, meaning that it was developed specifically for off-road riding. During the pre-war era of Norton manufacturing, the so-called trials bikes had only been available via mail order. For instance, the Colonial was one such bike, which had been developed by James Lansdowne Norton, the revered founder of the company, in the 1920s, after taking a riding holiday in South Africa. And it wasn't until the relatively late date of 1948 that such a machine was built and sold in the normal Norton range of motorcycles. This was the Norton 500T competition. In the post-World War II years, motorcycle trials became a very popular pastime. An entire generation of young men returned to civilian life after the constant adrenaline rush of war, and although they were undoubtedly glad to have survived, there was most definitely a void to be filled. motorcycles offered great excitement, whether just for transportation, road racing, or on the trial circuits, and machines like this one were very highly prized indeed. The Norton 500T started out with the diamond frame from the Norton 16H, with the same road holder forks at the front. However, the wheelbase was reduced considerably by sharply raking these road holder forks to bring them in line with the steering column. The 490cc engine of the Norton Model 18 and subsequently the Norton ES2 was then fitted into this frame, with a crankcase shield bolted underneath it. The only difference here was that this refitted engine had a bi-metal alloy head and barrel to try and keep the weight of the bike down to a minimal 300 pounds. This was eventually achieved by making other parts of the motorcycle lighter in the initial construction, like the silencer, rear engine plates, mudguards, number plates, and a 7-inch front brake. This front brake was also fitted with a water-excluding ring in a scalloped hub, and the cast-iron brake drum was drilled with large holes to help with the lightness issue. The work to make this 24 brake horsepower motorcycle a less heavy machine than the previous Nortons was also continued through to other aspects of the bike. Wheel rims were created from high tensile steel. A rubber saddle was used with alternative mountings to adjust the seat height, along with fully adjustable handlebars. This was a quick and easy bike that managed an excellent 24 brake horsepower at 5,300 revs per minute and was extremely popular with private owners. It also performed well as a trials machine, continuing the grand Norton tradition of reliability and success, with nothing much added to each subsequent model as each year went by. The odd part was replaced here and there with a lighter alloy version in order to make the 500T equivalent to someone on a continuous Weight Watchers diet, but it never became anorexic, lost its appetite, or ran out of energy. The pre-war style gearbox was never updated and remained firmly tucked in between the back of the crankcase and the rear wheel, fitted as it was with wide ratios and a folding kickstart lever. The only main feature added was the inclusion of the clutch from the perennially popular Norton Manx motorbike, which had performed so well on the racing circuit. It was still selling well and looking good when it disappeared, seemingly without reason, from the Norton catalogue in the September of 1953. The Norton 500T competition truly is a beautifully shaped motorbike, even by 21st century standards, with a ride that matched its aesthetic qualities. Packed all the punch of a heavyweight with the weigh-in of a featherweight. Norton never produced another trials bike after discontinuing this model, and the 500T competition was the last shining example of its kind. The Norton Commando was probably the best loved machine to come out of the last years of the British motorcycle industry. Hailed as the best and most famous parallel twin-engine bike of them all, it even won the Motorcycle News Machine of the Year competition 5 times in a row. It's easy to see why. The very first Commando was unveiled at the Earl's Court Show London in 1967 to a great reception. The sleek and strikingly original styling earned this Norton the name Fastback. The praise went to 2 development engineers, Bernard Hooper and Bob Trigg, helped by engineering director Dr. Stephen Bauer. They suggested that a conventional frame design was not aerodynamic enough and lacked good engineering principles. They also knew that the engine vibrations that had plagued earlier Norton twin-engine bikes would not be tolerated by a new generation of riders. Taking an existing 745cc engine from the Norton Atlas, they modified it to fit a radical new chassis by isolating the angled forward engine from the rider, as well as the transmission train and rear wheel. The engine was assembled together with the gearbox and swing arm as one unit. The twin cradle frame consisted of a large main spine plus twin down tubes, to which the engine became attached by means of adjustable rubber mounts at 3 calculated points. This was known as the isolastic system, and it allowed the motor to shake, rattle and roll with its 1950s origins, whilst keeping the late 1960s rider as peaceful and as laid back as the hippie doctrine of the time. 6 years after the initial success of the Commando 750 in 1973, the 745cc engine was bored out to produce a larger 850 Commando with a 4-stroke twin engine of 828ccs. This powerful bike looked just as good as it sounded, with a distinctive seat unit made of fiberglass. The sporty hump that dominated the rear, which earned it the nickname Fastback, gave the bike a racing line that echoed the success the previous model had achieved at the 1973 Formula 750 TT, with Peter Williams riding it. The Norton 850 Commando was available in a standard roadster edition and also a large tanked interstate version. This was so it could appeal to the speedy individual who wanted to tear around the countryside as if he were Peter Williams, and the more sedate rider who enjoyed the long-distance touring of the same countryside with an eye on an enjoyable ride rather than a full-out race. The Commando 850 is one of the few British twin-engine machines that could accelerate from 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds, which was revolutionary in its day, and the top speed was a blistering 120 miles per hour when you moved quickly through the 4-speed gearbox. Masses of torque could thrust the light and narrow chassis forwards in an exhilarating and breathtaking manner. The electronic ignition starter was introduced to the 850 Commando 2 years later, but by that time, the British twin-engine machine was already showing its age, especially in comparison to the newer designs flooding the home market from the Japanese sector. The Commando 850 was the last public motorcycle made by Norton before the company went into enforced liquidation, churning out the last few of these mean machines in 1978. Many people have wondered how this could have happened when the Commando was top of its field and such a successful bike, but the climate was changing. Norton continued low-key development of a motorbike designed and built specifically for several British police forces with a rotary engine over the next 10 years, but nothing matched the speed, grace and power of the Norton Commando. Since its untimely demise, interest has risen again in this classic bike, and enthusiasts will pick up a Commando 850 nowadays, as opposed to a similar Japanese bike, and spend every available weekend rebuilding their Commandos to match specific production design. The practicality and definite character of these classic British bikes make them, even now, a cut above the competition. As surprising in attack and using as much stealth in its quiet nature, the Commando deserves to be named after the soldier of the same name. It's well trained, dangerous to provoke, and fights to the end with every last drop of energy and strength. Commando by name, Commando by nature. As this great celebration of Norton motorcycles draws to a close, the latter years of the company's history, like the British motorcycle industry in general, failed to produce a happy ending. In the post-World War II years, there were some excellent new models to come out of Norton. Initially, the H16 and similar pre-war machines were the order of the day. But with Bert Hopwood and Joe Craig on board from 1946 onwards, the OHV Vertical Twins, OHC Development and Manx racing bikes proved very successful. Another huge advance was made in the 1950s, when brothers Rex and Cromie McCandless designed Norton's classic featherbed frame. From 1953, the addition of swinging fork rear suspension improved matters even further, as Norton enjoyed an enviable reputation for producing top-notch motorcycles that were both fast on the racetrack and ideal for everyday motoring. Nevertheless, despite design innovation, by the 1950s Norton had run into financial difficulties and in 1953 was bought by Associated Motorcycles, manufacturers of AJS and Matchless. This amalgamation of British motorcycle companies did, to a point, make financial sense. However, when such great marques were all grouped together where one struggled, they all faced disaster. Also, AMC failed to capitalise on the assets that they had, and this was the beginning of the end for Norton. During the 1960s, Norton left their Birmingham roots behind, with production transferred to AMC's London factory. When AMC collapsed in 1966, it was taken over by Manganese Bronze Holdings, when the Norton name was promoted as Norton Villiers, and then finally Norton Villiers Triumph. Sadly, this was all to no avail, as the group went bankrupt in 1977. Thankfully, quality will always win the day, and due to the hard work and commitment of classic motorcycle enthusiasts, the Norton heritage lives on. The wonderfully evocative names of the Dominator, Commando, and the International have been kept alive by collectors all over the world for future generations of Norton riders, and, as you've seen demonstrated throughout this programme, not under glass cases in museums. These motorcycles are ridden on a daily basis, used for the purpose for which they were designed all those years ago. It's also interesting to note that the Nortons tend to be very popular with the ladies who ride classic motorcycles, of whom there are a pleasingly high number. The golden age of the British motorcycle might be long gone, but one thing's absolutely for certain. The classic Norton motorcycles will never be forgotten.
Well, here we are about to spend a very enjoyable Sunday morning, beginning at Yeovilton in Somerset with the Spirit of the 60s. That was a period when motorcycles in this country were at their very best. We are going to capture some of that atmosphere today at the 10th anniversary run of the Spirit of the 60s run organised by the Western Motorcycle Club. We've been meeting some of the riders of those bikes. Some of them rode them back in the 60s, some of them who've taken on the habit since, and we'll be looking at some of the bikes that were built during that period and today capture that spirit of the 60s when motorcycling was at its best.
The visitors to this Royal Naval Air Station Museum will be delighted today because not only is the old Buccaneer out there on its hard standing, but 497 gleaming motorcycles of that wonderful era when we really did enjoy our motorcycling, a lot more freedom on the roads than there is today. These enthusiasts have brought the machines many miles, some of them up to nearly 200 miles, just to take part in this 80-odd mile annual run, organised by the Westland Motorcycle Club, a very enthusiastic club that enjoys road runs. And I think this is what the majority of old bike owners enjoy. Rather than put them on a stand and let the crowd wander up and down at shows and look at them, they like to get on them and hear them and ride them and feel them and smell them. Oh, to really enjoy the days that when they were a little bit younger than they are today. The 60s were the time when motorcycling was definitely in its heyday. We heard of the notorious cafe races at such locations as Ace Cafe on London's North Circular, when young and old tested their skills in bikes against each other. Not only British classics here today, but of course we have some wonderful Italian stuff as well. One of their popular classics, of course, is the Ducati. I've often wondered if the Italians ever had any other colour paint but red. They invariably painted their sports bikes red, and it really suited them. Great machines and very much sought after by today's enthusiasts. Unlike our British manufacturers, the Ducati, the Italian firm, is still producing some great bikes and doing very well nicely in the superbike racing. This is a Triton, half Triumph and half Norton. Norton being the frame part, that wonderful featherbed frame designed by Rex and Chromium McCandless. When Harold Daniels, the Norton rider, tried it out, he said it's like a featherbed, and it certainly earned its name through the racing era of the 50s and on into the 60s, and very much in classic riding now, and of course, made in England. The Triumph engine is very suitable, and these Tritons are very popular among the fortunate classic owners. BSA, 3 fine B's here, 2 twins and a single. This end we have the Gold Flash, which was the A10. BSA, when they built their first 500 twin, it was the A7, and then they uprated it to 650 to become the Gold Flash. One of the most tractable of the parallel twins, ideal for sidecar use. Well, this is a bit of a mishmash, if the owner will pardon my saying. It's got a Suzuki engine. The frame has been adapted and twisted a little bit from, I believe, a Rickman frame. It's called the Rat. I had a word with the owner here, and he's very proud of his result, and he enjoys riding it. What else can you ask for? And they also come in pairs. This is interesting. This is the Sunbeam post-war, built by BSAs. Many firms owned Sunbeams during their long career. This bike really showed the future, what we could do. An inline twin, shaft drive. Very nice bikes to ride, smooth, high revving. They built the S7 first with the bigger tires. And then they went a little bit smaller with the wheels to try and make it appeal more to motorcyclists, but our modern lads didn't want it. But they did want old bikes like this, the AJ. This is not the most immaculate bike on the lineup, except for the silencer, that's in good order. But what a popular machine these were. A good sporting ride-to-work bike, AJS. Might not look pretty, but it got here and it completed the run. AJS was AJ Stevens, which was taken over by the Matchless Group just before the war. Another fine AJS here, the twin. Showing off something that AJSs were very noted for, the jam pot suspension. And here we have a lineup of scooters. Vespa and Lambretta. Remember the mods during that period? They always had their scooters, long overcoats. Now then, the name Vince. First of all, HRD, and then Vincent, built in Stevenage in Berkshire. This is not one of the big 1000cc twins. The lesser known and more rare 500 Comet. Rare it might be, but valuable, yes, because ask John Surtees. He cut his teeth on the circuits in this country with a 500 Comet. And Velocette, well, I always enthuse over Velocets. Never made a bad bike. During the 30s, they're very popular for their overhead camshaft models, the KDT and the KDS. This is a pushrod model, but as with the MAC and MOV, they came on with the Venom and Viper and the Thruxton. They put short pushrods in. And this made the performance of that pushrod thing go almost as good as their overhead camshaft bikes. With a characteristic Velocette fishcan silencer. I love it. Constellation, no, it's not a Lockheed Constellation, this is a Royal Enfield, the big 750 parallel twin. Royal Enfield's motto, built like a gun. You can see the badge on the top of the tank there. Not one to earn a lot of prizes in road races, but they certainly did well when it come to cross-country work. And over the bumps, the trials, the scrambles, a good tough bike. Royal Enfield. And the BSA Gold Star, well, this is legend. There was a time when all the Clubman TTs were won by the famous BSA Gold Star. And if ever there was a sought after single today, yes, I think it must be the Goldie. This is a very attractive swinging arm version. The first one was a plunger, 350 and 500cc. Looks like no other and sounds like no other. The Royal Enfield Bullet 500. Very interesting this, because you can now buy a Bullet 350 and 500 made in India. They've cut out the Royal bit, they call it the Enfield now, but it's built under license. Such was the design and reliability of this bike, India chose it to go on producing it, and you can still buy an almost identical bike to this today. Brand new. And a combination, Matchless twin combination. Matchless, as I said earlier, they did buy out AJS's back in the 30s and built almost identical bikes. The sidecar man, well, he was the man who still wanted his bike, yet mother had to go with him, with the family. I did a lot of sidecarring in my time. Some of my most enjoyable motoring memories are with a sidecar. And a small Norton outfit. Sidecarring was not quite as popular in the 60s as it was earlier, because after the arrival of the Mini, many people turned over to the small car then. But it's nice now, and they're in their retirement with a few bob to spare, they can go back and buy a combination again and enjoy the spirit of the 60s. There's the gold flash outfit. Really was an ideal bike for pulling a chair. It had a good turn of speed, a very good bottom end there, bags of torque. I don't know what that lady's trying to describe there. Now there's an interesting featherbed Norton, this time with a big single. Norton's own engine. Scott, yes, Scott. One of the long life engines of this world. Scott designed the parallel twin water-cooled two-stroke engine, well, right at the, not long after the turn of the century. And it went on being produced. And this is a post-war model, you can see by the teleforks, and still gave a good turn of speed and power. But the most attractive thing about the Scott, and the thing that endows the ownership with much nostalgia and feeling, is the sound of it. The yowl. There's a Taunton club enjoying themselves over there, having a cup of tea before they set on their Spirit of the 60s run. 80 odd miles through the glorious countryside of Somerset. Well, you name it, you can find it here. As I said, 497 bikes. I really did enjoy strolling around. Now, this is a little bit different. It's in the 60s, but one that a chap has built to his own requirements. It's got the pre-war Norton International style tank on there. Twin Brooklands can silencers. Very interesting Norton. This is a fellow who's built a bike that looked like he wants it. And he's made a darn good job of it. One of the most attractive bikes there in my eye. And how patriotic can you get? It's all right to put a sticker on the tank, but this is the limit. But enjoying a ride on that AJS, well, he must be proud to be British. Another interesting Triton. Look, there's the featherbed frame with yet another Triumph engine in. Entirely different adaptation than the earlier one. The pipe's got a nice straw colour. The Norton Commando. It's a 750 SS, that one. They also did it with yellow mudguard, the yellow cowl on the front. It was very sporty that way too. This is more of the American styling with the higher handlebars. Norton's parallel twin. Of course, the parallel twin was the brainchild of Edmund Turner, who designed it for Triumphs back in the 30s. But come post-war, every firm that was producing a big bike realized that to get into the market, they had to compete with Triumph and build a parallel twin. 3 of them in the line here. On the outsides, we've got 2 BSAs in the middle, a very attractive matchless twin. And the Aerial Square 4, the only 4-cylinder bike at the show, and the only firm to build a Square 4, built it originally about 600cc back in the early 30s. Then after the war, it was produced at 1000cc, and this is one of the later ones with the alloy block. Very tractable bike, and 0 to 60 in that was better than I think any other bike there was. It didn't have exceptionally high top gear, but it had a performance like a car, the smooth acceleration there. Many of the motorcycle writers, they use those for their traveling around the countryside. BSA again, this time the 650cc Spitfires. And now we're going over to the start. Let's listen to the various sounds and roars of these bikes as they get away. first part of the run is quite enjoyable through the country lanes, and now we arrive at our first village on the route back on the main Yeovil-Frome Road at Queen Camel. This is a small village with a lot of history behind it, going right the way back to King Arthur's days. Charming little village, and I'm sure that the people out in the main street will be lined up to watch over these bikes as they go through. I'm sure enjoying the sight and the sound that they see, bringing back a lot of memories of their own motorcycling days. And what about the Morgan? That's going to be one of the oldest machines, still a motorcycle, being a three-wheeler. Morgan, built up in Malvern there. Now these Norton Commandos, some of them were fitted with an electric start that didn't have a very good name, but I've never heard them having problems with a kickstart before. But it's probably got a little bit fouled up, taking it quietly around the lanes. But I'm sure once he gets it going and gives it a good blasting out on the main road, it'll be performing well again. Do you reckon he might feel a little embarrassed? Well, it looks like we're up and running again now, and pillion passenger climbing aboard and all set for another leg of the run. No problem. And here we are at Cranmore, the East Somerset Railway, where they house the railway engines that belong to the famous David Shepherd. Nice parking area here for them all to come in at, and here will be the lunch stop and a big canteen there, quite capable of providing these hungry motorcyclists with a steak or whatever they wish. We must mention here the work done by the marshals and outriders on a run like this, because they're very valuable. Voluntarily they come out and make up a point on corners or in a depot like this where they all come in and do a lot of work during the day. But of course, they too are motorcyclists at heart. That's the famous bathtub Triumph. You can see by the shape on the back how it got that name. That colour makes it the Triumph 21 to 350. It's interesting too to see the different attire that these motorcyclists are in. Some with their anorak and jeans, and some with the proper motorcycle gear. It just depends whether they're everyday motorcyclists. Fast motorcyclists will just get the bike out occasionally and come along for a run. But of course with a scooter, well, you only need just a little bit of rain protection. Nice 500 twin BSA. And judging by this fellow's array of badges, he's done a few runs in his time. Harley Davidson, one of our American entrance, American bike that is, still produced today and with a very popular following. We're certainly crowding in. I think it's going to be a rush for the queue soon. One of our gold stars. And that's a very relaxing way to do it with a sidecar. Not an easy thing to get used to, but once you are, well, to me, it was a lot of enjoyment. Another rare bike coming in now, it's a Douglas Dragonfly, built at Kingswood in Bristol. Only a small firm and didn't stand the pressures of society not for long after the war and lost out. What a shame. They always built a different bike, a very nice bike. 350 horizontally opposed twins. One of the later Nortons that all be covering there. Something that we felt we had to do, I suppose, to compete with the different and more attractive foreign bikes, but I always found it sad to cover up good machinery. That's the Norton Dominator. That's their 500 twin. Followed by yet another Triumph. I think we see the name Triumph more than any other on this run. Of course, they did go on producing their bikes much longer than the other firms that went to the wall. A couple of marshals coming in. They too have earned their lunch. There's something magic about motorbikes, something that inspires us to do all sorts of things, even write poetry. Whenever I see a British bike, I usually start to drool as memories flood back to the days of village life, of school. Local men on old machines, belt drive, oil pumped by hand, and slipping clutches, rectified with a pocket full of sand. Then appeared a Biza Sloper and an Aerial, big square 4. We had Velos, Nortons, many makes just before the war. Then came the Yanks with their Harleys and Indians, V-twin sound. I didn't like them with their clutches and gear change, the wrong way round. As a young married man, I bought my first bike, a BSA B21. It took me to work several miles each day and weekend provided good fun. We'd watch all the experts up Basbury Ring taking part in the local club trials. Then Sunday night, off to Wells Pictures, we knocked up some pleasure-filled miles. We could leave our bikes in the car park. No padlock, no ruddy great chain. You knew that your bike and your leggings were there when you went back again. I then had a Velo, M20, A7. The last two had sidecars to pull, because small car expense was no option for me, despite the old sidecar was full. There's nothing quite like old bike engines. There rattles and drips of hot oil. We like kickstarts and cables and 6 volts, magnetos, not even a coil. So thank God there's folk, like the Westland Club, to keep old bikes looking like new. Because without those nostalgic memories, I'd be a sad man, wouldn't you? Many of the bikes here were, and probably are, capable of 100 miles per hour. In the 60s, young lads of 16 were riding such bikes on a provisional license, in many cases without a helmet. Thoughts like this can fill one with horror today. Yes, there were accidents, but nothing seemed to daunt the spirit of the riders of that era. I've always found the comradeship of motorcyclists second to none. Breakdowns were common, especially amongst those who ran their bikes on a shoestring. Bet your life another bike would always stop and get possible help. Yes, that spirit is here in this group today. Help in finding or supplying rare parts, or freely giving helpful advice. If you're a biker, you've got friends. And still they come, filling up this quite large car park. I think the whole lot appeared here free of any major problems. Well-known Cranmore siding, where many interesting trains have run over the past few years. There's a strange affinity, too, between those who follow the steam engine world and those who follow the motorcycle world. There's something about the open machinery that you can watch and work. Now there's an interesting little bike there, the James. James is a manufacturer in their own rights of their own engines way before the war. But post-war, concentrated like many other small firms, building a bike with a Villiers two-stroke engine, a general utility bike for getting to work. Nice little machines they were too. Nice pair of the Triumph bathtub twins, both of them 350, model 21. Beautiful styling were Triumphs. Now it looks like we've got the name broken on the bathtub back there, but now there's something to look for at his next Auto Jumbo. That's what biking's all about. Forever surging. A couple of Cottons here. Now that's an old name in the motorcycle world. A Gloucester firm. Once again, after the war, common users of Villiers two-stroke engines. Villiers must have produced millions of engines. Made a very interesting frame before the war, all straight tubes bolted together. Very strong, very light. Another 350 twin. The old timers enjoying their wander around too. Bet your life the restaurant is full today. Just look at them. Oh well, isn't everybody who wants a steak for lunch? Another of our Harley Davidson entries. Harley must be congratulated on their marketing because I think they make as much money in this country and other countries on their spares and jackets and trousers, etc. with their logo on as much as they do out of their bikes. Little 175cc BS8 Bantam, that famous bike that engine pattern copied from DKW after the war. This is one of the last of them, the 175. Our two Lambrettas. Not my favourite bike to ride. The centre of gravity was all wrong as far as I was concerned, but I think scooter riding was an art of its own. Certainly had a big following, and still has. Another of our German machines here. Germany went for the black styling, you see, whereas Italy went for the bright red. But the rough aluminium finish on there, but what a smart machine they are. And good engineering is what you'd expect from Germany. That's an interesting BSA there, belonging to local lad Kevin Samways. He's very proud today because it's his bike actually advertising the Spirit of the 60s on all the brochures. Yes, Kevin's a very proud motorcyclist, spent a lot of time on that machine, and it shows. And our little three-wheeler, our what we call the bubble car, built by Isetta, BMWs. Some were Heinkels, then there was the unusual one, the Messerschmitt. Very popular, but of course they went out of fashion when the Mini came in. And back to my Velosets again. I do love that Velo. Very unusual way of adjusting the rear suspension at the back. It's quite self-explanatory, as you can see there. Great bikes, Velos. Character of their own and a sound of their own. And Velosets didn't only make bikes of that nature. This is the LE Veloset. Water-cooled, flat twin. Beautiful little machine. So quiet, probably one of the quietest bikes ever built. The early ones were hand start and hand change, but this is a later one with a kick start and the foot change. Clever bit of engineering, forward thinking, but then again, the British motorcyclists didn't like progress. Somebody spotted something that's not quite authentic. You'll always get this. But of course, didn't every motorcyclist wants to be authentic? He wants to put a more modern carburetor. He wants to put a better coil on and change the ignition. He wants to improve. Whereas others stick to the original. And if they decide to stick to the original, bet your life somebody's going to come along and tell you just haven't quite got it right. But that's what creates the atmosphere of the whole day. Nice megaphone exhaust there. Of course, back in the old days of the racing motorcyclists, the megaphones were tuned and the engine wouldn't run very well at low speeds. They'd only run when they were on the meg. And when they were on the meg, didn't they sound beautiful? Bikes like the Norton over there. Beautiful example that was of a featherbed frame. A pair of more recent Nortons here. Quite pretty compared with the old black and silver. The Mitchell family, a local family, interested in the steam. Have a steam engine they manage most weekends. They too find it interesting coming around and look at the old bikes. Now here is a bit of cream. The top of the show as far as any motorcyclist in that era was concerned, the Vincent. We had the Vincent Rapide, the Vincent Black Shadow. Now this is the Black Prince, a fully enclosed bike. Absolute luxury in its day. One of the most expensive, if not the most expensive British bike. And I dare say, if you start bidding for any of the bikes there on this show today, this is going to be by far the most expensive. You don't find many of them around now in the preservation world. Myself, I still adopt the same attitude as I do about some of the others. Why cover up good engineering? But then again, to each his own. The Black Prince. Something completely different, but still capable of a run on the Spirit of the 60s.
I'll turn it around if you like.
Well, it's time for our marshals to get themselves together again, set off to the various junctions to make sure these lads don't get lost on the leg home. They're going back to Yeovilton again, where they will get their prizes and awards and have a good old natter as to how the road was and how the run was and how they enjoyed everything. It's a great day. Let's hear them as they take off. Well, did you enjoy the day? I certainly did, and I'm sure many others did as well. Especially these lads who are riding their bikes. If you've got a bike at home, get it out and ride it, or if you want one, go and find one. There's plenty about. Because this is what it's all about, enjoying life. Getting out there and recreating the things that we enjoyed so many years ago. Recreate what we've recreated today, the spirit of the 60s.
Right, it's Sunday morning and we're down at the charming little seaside town of Lyme Regis. This is the time of day when most people are at home having their fried breakfast, enjoying their Sunday paper, but the members of the Westland Classic Motorcycle Club are down here ready to start their annual Coast to Coast. The Coast to Coast run is an annual event and we leave here with bikes built from the 1920s right the way up into the around about 1960. 350 odd in all, and we should be on the road from here up through Yeovil and Wells, doing some stops there, ending up at Weston-super-Mare. Wish us all the luck with the weather. There's a lot of enthusiasts and a lot of enthusiasm here. We're on the way.
First time I've seen the toy yet.
Well, the marshals are ready, and from now till 10 o'clock the bikes will come rolling in. Here's a charming old new Imperial that's come a long way. Some of these riders have ridden many, many miles to do the start of this run, but of course a few, they did have bed and breakfast in Lyme Regis and a very pleasant evening in the pub opposite the start. There's another famous British name, look, Scott. That wonderful two-stroke engine that went on unchanged for many, many years. Still capable of doing a long run today, I'm sure. Another interesting machine here, a Featherbed Norton. A very famous racing frame. And of course, Triumphs. We've got to see the Triumphs, haven't we? Because they've been produced in their thousands ever since the rest of the British bikes just laid down to rest. What a shame that was. But here is a day today when we can renew our enthusiasm by seeing those great names that made this country so famous. Very well organised, run this. It's been going on enough years now for all the marshals and organisers to get it really up together. It really is a credit to them. Not only vintage bikes, but the old vintage Mark 8 goggles on there, the sight that we saw so often back in the old motorcycling days. And here's a nice Norton Commando coming in for the start now. Really is wonderful, especially to me, to hear the different sounds from the two strokes, the twins, the singles, and even the fours as they make their way to the start. One of the sweetest of all the twins, the Matchless. Weather doesn't look too good. It'll take more than a drop of rain to daunt these hardened old bikers. There's Tony Haywood. He's the secretary of it all, and what a job he's had. We'll have a chat to him later on. There's no V-twin AJS there that I followed all the way down this morning. And here the new Imperial, in need of a few minor adjustments. Look at that, 1937, and looks like he's just come out of the showroom. That's enthusiasm for you. The name of AJS on the last badge they used. The name of Triumph, of course, pops up pretty regularly. They've been producing bikes right up into the very day, and what a nice bike they produce now. But of course, names like this and many others are among the 40-odd manufacturers that manufactured bikes in the 1930s. Note the ladies showing enthusiasm today. This is no man's day out. A lot of ladies come along, not only as passengers, but to ride as well. Here's the arrival of a very attractive machine, well-known Ariel Square 4. And who would be happier than the person who owned this machine back in the 50s and 60s, the Gold Flash, the PSA A10 combination there. I did all my family motoring in the early days with a combination. We couldn't afford cars, and what's more, not many of us really wanted one. Nice feeling of relief as you arrive down at Lyme Regis, having ridden a fair few miles to get there. And then all the hubbub starts, all the enthusiasts having a chat together, and the marshals getting it all sorted out, and everyone waiting for the start. It's quite an exciting period. Very interesting little bike here, controversial in its day, but turned out to be a good one, the Ariel Leader. Not all youngsters here today either. You can see the enthusiasm here in people not only in their 20s but going right up into the 70s. There's Jim Hastelow, and there's Jerk in there, sorting out a few early problems. And the arrival of the oldest machine on the road, number 1. Well, who could be happier than a man riding the big Vincent 1000 today? Should be a relatively easy run for a big machine like that. A true classic. And right down to the last little side bulb that BS8 ever produced, the C10L. So the attractive area for the start, it's right along the promenade, and you put your bike on the stand, hoping it doesn't run forward down onto the sands. But I don't think we've had any problems so far like that. But they're right on the beach side of Lyme Regis, and unfortunately we didn't have the sun to greet us this year. But you can't have everything, can you? You got the smell and the sound of an old bike, well, what else do you want? The line-up certainly looking up now, and looking by the puddles, so's the rain building up too. An enthusiast there that not only on this run, looks like he competed in the Spirit of the 60s a few weeks ago. Another well-known local motorcycle run. And of course the mayor of Lyme Regis, he's turned out together with his man there, the town crier, to see everybody off, despite what has turned out now to be pouring wet.
Oh yay! Oh yay! Oh yay! On this day, the 22nd day of June, in the year 1997, the Westland Motorcycle Club will celebrate their 12th anniversary with the annual Coast to Coast Run.
And so it's the off. Number 1 chugging away on that old V-twin into the wet. And we were greeted at the start with not only the town crier, but a horrendous storm. But it didn't damp any enthusiasm, not even from the people who come to watch. Of course, if you're togged up to ride on a motorbike, you're pretty waterproof, provided it doesn't go on too long. So let's keep our fingers crossed. And let's listen now as these old timers pull away from the start. And off we go up through the town of Lyme Regis, and eventually out onto the main road into the county of Devon. What do you call a lot of motorcyclists? A gaggle, I suppose you could call them. Out on the main road with bags of enthusiasts to watch them, despite the weather, as we said before. That doesn't bother them. They're the good old marshals who never let us down, telling us just which way to turn. Marshals now heading on for their further points. They really work hard and do a great mileage. And what a good team of volunteers they are. Full marks for the marshals on a run like this. And of course full marks for the riders. Let's listen to them in a minute as they take this corner. And you will hear those different sounds of the old British machinery. The sound that we all love so much. Now we're in the town of Axminster, negotiating our way through the town, still in the wet, but it's looking a little bit brighter all around, and things are looking good. So far everybody's behaved themselves well. They do, they're good mature riders. This is not a race, this is an event when you go along and enjoy the company of other motorcyclists. But no run is without the occasional snag. No need to call for the man who can here. It's a do-it-yourself job with this puncture.
Oh, sorry, you already got the vomit. Yeah. Yeah.
What we want to see is the pressure gauge going up.
Yeah.
Well, after an extremely wet start down at Lyme Regis, we've now arrived at Westland Social Club car park. This is the home of the classic club that's organising this event. We've all been in and had a coffee and a sticky bun, and now it's time to stroll around and see if we can find a bike or a person of interest to have a chat to.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh. Are they going to talk to you? Well, that's not.
Yeah, well, this is a rather a rare machine for the run. There aren't many of these. This is a 250 Panther. I believe you said 1936. You had it very long.
It's been in the family since new.
Has it really? That's interesting. And where did you ride it from this morning?
Well, I started off from Sparkford.
Yeah.
And then went to Lyme Regis, and on the way back to Western now, obviously.
Not a very good send-off down there this morning with the weather.
No, that's true. I've known worse.
That's good. And this has been registered in your name since new, or in the family?
In my father's name.
That's great.
For the first 40 years, and then I took it over from him.
That's great.
It needs a repainting now, but it's going well.
Well, that's sometimes a shame to repaint, I think, because if you've got a bit of originality about them, I think that looks good. And you come to a stage sometimes when you don't quite know what to do. But you say 1936, I bet when they built this bike, they never thought it'd be doing a run here sort of 60 odd years on, did they?
It was referred to as grey porridge in one of the magazines years ago.
But
it lasts pretty well.
Porridge is good for a good old mainstay, and that's what the bike is. Well, thanks very much.
Okay, thanks.
Well, now our intrepid cameraman has decided to take to the road, this time really on the run in a sidecar. Packed on the side of a lovely old Sunbeam Lion. More about that later. And here we are in Yeovil, up on the Preston Road, trying to get out in the busy morning's traffic. Right in the sound and the smell of those beautiful old machines. Well, we head along here to the lights. That's my good self with my dear daughter-in-law just in front there on the B31 BSA. The rain has now stopped, so she's decided to get aboard and have a ride to Western Super Mare. Wish us luck. Upon reaching the traffic lights in Preston Road, we turn left on the long climb up Larkhill Road. We'll have a chance again then to watch and listen to some of these marvellous machines. And what a wonderful sight to see shadows on the road and the blue sky up there. A very welcome sight, I can assure you. Here we come again. The old B-31 sounding good, isn't it? Right along Thorn Lane. Now we get a glimpse across at the immaculate finish on that old Sunbeam motorcycle. Sunbeams were also the producers of a very well-known lacquer back in their factory days, and that lacquer was advertised by being put onto the motorbikes. They didn't bother even with chrome rims in many cases. Everything was done with this glorious black that's never been beaten. A real class machine was the old Sunbeam, and you'll get used to the steady putt-putt of that 600cc side valves that pulls along with that sidecar throughout this run, as far as Wells anyway. Nice view of another famous make there, Norton's. Nobody made a better handling bike than Norton. That probably includes the bikes that are built today. Noted for their road holder frames and their featherbed frame. And there's another wonderful old bit of machinery there, the BSE Sloper. Two of them, look. Well, what a day this is for the enthusiast to go bike spotting. Well, we're leaving Yeovil now, heading towards the village of Budford. Taking our time through here, well known for its speed cameras. Majority of the bikes on this run were cruising on about 40-45 mile an hour. It's quite a gentle run. It's a fairly long one, so you just like to preserve the old machinery and enjoy the ride. Especially now the rain's stopped. You can't compare these bike performances with the modern vehicles, the modern cars, but something that the modern machines and cars won't give you is the gentle comfort of sitting there, sitting back on your bike, and you can even hear the birds as you go along and smell the hedgerows. It's an atmosphere that's unequaled. Once a biker, it never goes out of your system. There's a beautiful English countryside, now in the village of Sparkford, the home of the very well-known Haynes motorcycle and car manuals. just coming past their factory now. And as they turn left onto the road towards Castlecary, they'll go past the Haynes Museum. And over in that museum are still many more bikes, all immaculately prepared but cold. Out here the bikes are just a little bit dirtier, but they're warm and they're working. So no time to stop at the museum. This is a museum on the move today. Having passed Castlecary, we're now near Evercreech, on the way towards the town of Shepton Mallet. Little BSA Bantam going well, 123cc, one of the most popular go-to-work bikes in the 50s. The design was taken from the German DKW design and put into very good use, and the run of Bantams went on for many, many years. That is one of the old original D1 Bantam. And in his home county with the registration of LYA, that being the Somerset registration. And we've overtaken number one. A 1922 machine, but still going strong. The owners, of course, are the organisers of the Somerset section of the Vintage Motorcycle Club. And now we arrive for a well-earned lunch stop in the beautiful city in the heart of Somerset, Wells. What more lovely setting could we have for this array of machinery than in the cobbled marketplace, under the shadow of the cathedral. And here they come, echoing down through the narrow streets. Many people coming out to see them today. All those many makes, many riders, all enjoying themselves, glad the rain has stopped. There's a bike there carrying a fire extinguisher, but that really was an AFS machine. The old Matchless there. Followed by the good old plotter of the British Society, the M21, the SA sidewall. Not a fast machine, but very, very reliable. Everybody looking forward to their stop now, where they've BSAs and Velisets. All they've got in mind now is not to make it a bike, but a cup of coffee and a few sandwiches. Well, now we're in that beautiful cathedral city of Wells. The sun is shining once again, and I'm chatting to Brian, who's done a stalwart job for us this morning. He actually took our cameraman in the sidecar here. No trouble to you, Brian?
No trouble whatsoever.
I'm glad of that.
He kept that sidecar down very, very well.
I'm sure he had a very good reason for why. I like this combination. I had a look at it down at Lyme. It's an old Sunbeam. This is a 600 sidewall.
Yes, 1932.
And it's a Lion, as we see, well advertised on here.
Sunbeam
Go ahead,
Lion.
show them all. That's lovely. How long have you had this one?
I've had this one since about 1976, and I used to ride it solo, and then my wife, she gave up riding on the back of motorcycles years ago.
Yeah, they
so yes, so she said she didn't feel safe, so I thought the only thing is now to get a sidecar. And I spent 18 months doing the sidecar. I nearly gave up, it was in such a bad condition, but there again I finished it, and she loves it. She actually falls asleep actually as she goes along.
That's nice to say, because an old 600 side bulb has got to have a side. That's one of the old plodders.
That's it.
And how many times have you done the coast to coast?
This is my 4th time.
The 4th time, same here too. That's the same for me.
And it's the first time we've had rain in this 4 years, if I remember right.
That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Well, wish you a happy trip on the way to Weston.
Okay.
Probably see you again.
Yes, we will.
Thanks,
Okay.
Brian. Thanks for your help
Thank
too.
you.
Well done.
Okay, thank you.
And not only British bikes here, here's the Britton family enjoying their lunch. Looks good, John.
Well, we're going to have a chat now about one of my favourite bikes. I used to have one of these in civilian pattern, but these were used by the Army for many years, all through in World War II, the BSA M20. One of the most docile side bulbs ever to be produced. And of course they went on in a 600 form to be very useful with the AA. Now here's a fellow here who I believe belongs to the Military Vehicle Trust. That is the group of collectors of military vehicles. And what's your view of the old M20?
Well, I came back into motorcycling when I turned 50 after a 30-year gap. Had a Bantam for 2 years, and then local chap who I met via the VMCC used to ride this to the club. Took an interest in the military machine. As you say, different. I was hardly likely to get up to any trouble with speed limits, or exceeding them, I should say.
That's true. When you see the sign slow on the road, you speed up, don't you?
So I saw it running for a year, knew the rallies it had been on. I was just talking to the chap now, actually. He's on the rally today. And then when it came up for sale, I bought it. So I've had this for 2 years now.
Have you done this run before?
Yeah, did it last year.
Did last year, and had a good trouble-free run, I hope.
And down at Weymouth with the military trust people last weekend, they had their military.
Yeah, you got lots of entries.
Down there.
Lots of interest in that particular type of thing with the old lorries. And
well, I enjoy it, and
it's great fun.
If other people enjoy looking at the machine, that's fine.
Well, that's why we're talking to you today. And well, there's no trouble to get an old thing like that from here to Weston. Where have you got to go back to?
Back to Street. So
back to Street. Well, not too bad.
Local, right?
Pretty local. Well,
yes, yeah.
Nice to chat to you, and thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to have a chat with a very lucky fellow here who's on the run today, Andy, and he's riding a very interesting motorcycle. Is that right, Andy? The old Rudge?
Yes.
How many years have you had it?
I've had it since I was 15. I'm a little older than that now, Jerry.
You're creeping on very well now, yes. And
yes.
These bikes now, the Rudge, I mean, it was a famous make, wasn't it? The old saying that their advert was "Don't trudge it, rudge it," wasn't it?
Trudge it, rudge it.
And what model is yours?
It's 4 valves, 4 speed. It's a 1938 Ulster.
Great stuff. Now, very expensive bike to buy now, and you paid how much for it?
£5.
That's not.
Should have been 7 shillings and 10 pence, but I didn't have the money. Or £7 and 10 pence rather. But
That's not bad. I think you did very well there. And how many times have you done this run then?
I've probably done it a couple of times before, but I haven't done it for a few years.
No, I haven't seen you on it
first one
before,
for a while.
But you're enjoying it today despite the drop of spit we were having
indeed.
down.
Yes, it's excellent. I've been riding as a pair with my friend's Rudge, and we've had a great run coming up.
They're both 500s, are they?
Both 500s.
So you keep in.
Yeah, the other one's a 37 model, just a year older, but it really looks the same.
Very much the same too. And
yes.
I didn't know till today you were a motorcycle enthusiast, but you must have been for a long time to kept that.
Well, yes, I rode that on about 2 weeks after my 16th birthday. I rode it to school, and then I rode it every day until I was 23. So I can't complain.
And is that an original finish on there?
No, it's a minor modifications. It shouldn't have a dual seat, but you have to do a few things for comfort.
What about paintwork?
Predictability. It was last painted when I was 19 in about 67.
That's going back a little bit now,
So
but they're lovely bikes, aren't they, the old Rudge?
Yeah.
Pity they didn't make something like it now. Even the push bikes were somewhat to be proud of.
Yes, indeed.
Anyway, wish you luck on the run then.
Okay,
nice seeing you again,
thank you very much, Jerry. All the best.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Well, now it's time to descend the very well-known landmark in our county, Cheddar Gorge. Twisty, steep and wet, something to be taken with great caution, but interesting. We wouldn't miss it. There have been opportunities in the past to bypass the gorge, but these motorcyclists said, no, we'll have a go at it. We have on other years, of course, gone up through the gorge, which I enjoyed very much when I had a motorcycle combination, but this year we're taking it easy, coming down. Any stranger coming down this gorge could soon get caught out. These corners don't look too bad, but they tend to wrap up on you a bit as you come through, and for the motorcyclists, it's an interesting challenge, the gorge.
Well, here we are, we've made it, Weston-super-Mare, still a few bikes rolling in, and absolutely thousands of people have turned out just to see the old bikes, most of them made in Great Britain. It's a wonderful sight, not only just to see them, but to hear them and smell them. And over here on the left, we got Tony Haywood, who organised this event with a little help from his friends. Had a busy time lately, Tony. What do you think of the day then?
Brilliant. Yeah, it's all gone very well, I think, hasn't it?
I think so too.
You enjoyed it as a participant?
Well,
I can say that properly now, yeah.
Not after. You and your family worked very hard throughout the whole year, I suppose, organising this.
Yeah,
for quite a long time.
We've turned our front room into sort of like mission control over the past couple of weeks with boxes and stuff like that all over the place. But
what was the total entry, Tom?
Total entry was 286.
286, that's pretty good. How does that compare with other years?
It's about normal. The best we've had is 300, which was on the 10th. But,
well, you can have too many, can't you? Really?
Yeah, I think 300 is a nice number to bring along on a day like this.
I think it's marvellous. We were anticipating a wet day, so it wasn't a very good start down this night, was it?
No.
Nobody was too disappointed, and it's come through, and now the sun is shining.
I think everybody was fearing a 1991 Aqua run again, but,
that was the time,
which was famous and still is. Everybody still remembers that. Some people reckon they're still drying out from it. But
I suppose really, the truth of the matter is, Tony, you'd like to be riding, really.
As an entrant? Yeah, I'd like to ride the old Norton. You know, my old Norton.
The only thing, if you rode your old Norton, you wouldn't hear t'others coming.
Well, no, I don't think I'd get very far either, would I, Ger?
I think the law would be there. Anyway, well done, Tony.
Right.
Congratulations on a wonderful show, and look forward to seeing you again next year.
Yes,
wish we
here.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Ger.
Well, there's so many bikes here today, so many makes. We can't do them all, but we just got to do the best we can. The first one here, the tractive red tank, is an aerial. It's a post-war aerial. Aerials were a fine firm, making a good sound, solid machine. They didn't enter into the Grand Prix stuff with the TTs, etc. But ask Sammy Miller what they were like for trials. I mean, he's the world champions trials rider in his day. The famous name of aerial. And of course, everybody knows a Norton. That is a pre-war international Norton there. And what a fine machine. And you want a lot of money to buy one of those nowadays. But that bike there, although it's got the old girder forks, believe me, the handling of that would be as good as any here on the field today. Now, Dusty Miller there, he's about to start off back to Minehead. He'd had a long ride down to Lyme Regis this morning. I know it won't start, but I'm sure. What's the forks like now, Dusty?
Oh, they're staying up,
They're staying up now.
As the actress said,
post-war Velos fitted a Doughty pneumatic fork on the front, and they do give a little bit of problem leaking. But Veloset, a fine machine, and one of the best in its day, and I'm sure once Dusty got the forks right and got it started, he'll agree with me.
Oh yes.
Now, we've already had a look at one M20 Army vehicle, motorcycle. We've got another one here, but this one's got the div signs. This is the interesting part of rebuilding military stuff. You've got the all the div signs, etc. to put down. You notice the number on the tank beginning with C. All Army motorcycles, World War II, had a C number on them. But there she is, that fine old sidewall, the BSA M20. Well, we can't go home until we've had a look at the oldest bike on the run. And back in 1922, Royal Enfields made this lovely machine. And now it's in the hands of Brian. How long have you possessed it, Brian?
Well, over 20 years.
You've
now.
had it over 20 years?
Yes.
So what cc is this one?
965.
965. I built really for sidecar purposes, wasn't it?
Yes, it wasn't sold without a sidecar.
Was it not?
No.
Very unusual starting, the old wind-up style start on the side there too. Very unusual.
Needs a lot more effort with a handle than it would kick-starting.
Well, that is true, yeah.
Yes.
And had a nice run with it today?
Yes, very good today.
It's cruising on. I mean, we were behind you some of the time, but you're keeping up. You're 40, 45 at places there.
Well, I wouldn't know. I've got no speed up.
Well, we can tell you that. I can assure you. The B31 was plodding on behind you nicely. Yes, you were doing very well. And it's nice to see. Well, so you're looking forward to getting the prize for the oldest bike, I hope, now today, are you? Or do they?
I'm glad you said the oldest bike.
Because they do a combination of the oldest bike and rider, I think. But I mean, young chap like you don't stand a chance, do you, bro?
No, I don't. It's got to be the oldest bike, hasn't it?
Anyway, many more years of happy motorcycling. Lovely to see the old Enfield here again today, and probably see you again next year.
Yeah, we hope so.
All right then, bro.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I was talking just now about all the good old mainly British bikes, but they aren't all British. We've got a good German bike here, the BMW. BMW, of course, still manufacturing an excellent bike now. Not only is it a German bike, but it's come with a couple more all the way from Germany. Here's three lads here. 7 times they come across here, and I know why they come. They come because they get the prize for the furthest distance. Congratulations, lads, you've done another year. Have you enjoyed the run again?
Yes, great. But we have not got a prize yet, so might be someone come from Scotland or somewhere far away than we did.
Well, then you'll have to live somewhere else and come further next year, won't you? I'm sure you'll work away. It's lovely to see you each year anyway, and nice to know you come over here and enjoy the motorcycling in this country. Is there much in the way of vintage motorcycling going on in Germany?
Yes.
You have many meets with old bicycles?
Yes, but I think the meeting in England are more interesting.
Yeah, more enthusiastic.
Probably a bigger variety going on. Yeah. Well, anyway, you're always welcome, you know that, and it's lovely to see you, and thanks for helping the weather out today. We thought you'd let us down this morning, but spirits were not dampened, were they? We got there all the way. And you had a trouble-free run all the way up?
Yeah, mine worked.
You overtook me a couple of times anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Shut up. Nothing.
only minor repairs.
Anyway, thanks lads. Lovely chatting to you once again.
Okay. A lot.
Right, it's been great fun meeting all the old colleagues, old friends and bikers today, but not only bikers, we got bikeresses. Now then, Sandy, how far have you come to take part in this run today?
From Swindon.
From Swindon? Did you ride all the way down the line?
Yeah, we rode down last night and stayed overnight.
Yeah, how long have you been interested in bikes then?
Years.
Years
and years, yeah.
And this is a beautiful little machine.
Yeah, this isn't an ordinary leader actually, it's a special. So
What's special about it?
It's got a Honda engine, so a lot of people don't like it.
We don't say things like that, but of course the aerial leader.
Yeah, I do ride a normal leader as well, I must admit.
But that was a very modern machine that came out.
At the time,
we British people didn't like it. It was too much like change, and we drop out on progress, and I think that's it.
right,
But thankfully, people like yourself still keep riding. You had a nice day with it.
Very nice, yeah.
And you do many runs?
We haven't done many this year, but normally we do quite a few, yeah. We're going to the aerial rally in Kent next month.
Yeah, you say we. The old man does the same,
yeah, he's on the Arrow there.
Oh, well, that's a nice leader and arrow, nice pigeon pair
That's
there,
it,
isn't it?
yeah.
So you got to ride back to Swindon now, haven't you?
Yeah, we're going to have a meal on the way home now.
Well, I hope so too. Sandy's lovely to meet, lovely to chat to you, and many miles more, I hope.
Oh yes, we'll be here again next year, I'm sure.
I'm sure of it too. Yeah, and bring some more fine weather.
Yeah, let's
Thanks,
hope it stays that way. Thank you.
Well, this is where I get a bit of time to myself now and enjoy doing what I really do love to do, and that is to wander around and gaze at the bits and pieces we've got here on these old bikes. You know, you won't find two the same, because everybody that's owned a bike for a long time has put their own little necessity on there and customized them to a certain degree. What a fine display there is here to look at. 280 odd in all, and if there isn't a bike here to please any enthusiast, well, I just don't know where he came from. It's been a wonderful day. The weather turned out to be very favourable. And there's enthusiasts here, young and old, and you can bet your life that some of these older people are looking around and remembering the day when they saw these bikes new in the showrooms. And yearn to be able to go and put a deposit down on one, even though they were not much over £100 to buy. No matter what bike you own, I love the bike I've got, but you always go around and admire others. And of course, on the left there's a Honda with that twin bike there. Even the Japanese bikes have been over here long enough now to be regarded as classics. You can see out on the road there that several of the riders are now wending their way home. They've had a good day, I'm sure. Can't think of any reason why everyone taking part haven't enjoyed themselves. I certainly did. It was great being on the road with such a bunch of enthusiasts. And here's the famous Velocette about to fire up now and set off for its homeward journey. How far? I don't know. Some of these riders have got another 50, 60, probably further miles to go, even after the run's been completed. And the youngsters there showing their enthusiasm. It's going to be a few years yet, son, before you can handle that old BSA combination. Well, what a great day it's been. I certainly enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed watching it and being on the road with us. But all those motorcyclists, those enthusiasts and the people around have done a great thing for charity today, because Headway is the concern that they have raised a lot of money for. That's for head injuries involved in accidents, and a lot of money has gone to that cause through this run. So what better way to spend a day than enjoying yourself and at the same time doing somebody a favour. So it's farewell from all of us now, and we'll meet you again on the road sometime.